Chapter 1141. Everyone could imagine such a scene. A cute lowly wearing a cute pink and white princess dress and white cotton socks was actually riding on the neck of a woman. Moreover, this woman's long legs were already taller than the lowly's entire height. When she was riding on Kong Na's neck, Kong Na's heels only reached her calves. Moreover, this woman was very beautiful. She was the goddess in the hearts of all the men in Yuzhong City. Under normal circumstances, everyone would often see a scene of a young and beautiful mother riding on the neck of a cute and silly daughter. However, once the scene was reversed and the mother was riding on the neck of the lowly daughter, this scene would be indescribable. Anyway, everyone suffered a huge visual and mental impact, an impact that could not be erased in a lifetime. Later on, many gentlemen in Yuzhong City were affected by this scene in front of them. It deeply inspired them to create doujinshi paintings that made people's blood boil, but at the same time, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Later on, a huge school of lowly was born, the Lowly Night School. Gu Xianyuan was also regarded as the ancestor of the Lowly Night School by these gentlemen, and was later deeply admired, of course, because this scene had a huge negative impact on a certain Jindy. This school was also deeply suppressed. It was not until many years later that they dared to come out in the open. For a period of time in the future, all of them had to hide in the internet and tremble. In fact, at this time, Gu Xianyuan also felt very subtle. In the past, he was a guy who was ridden by a lowly. Qingpin's favorite thing was to settle down in Guhan's baby pouch. The story and rumors of a lowly living in Guhan's arms were also widely spread in Yuzhong City. Now that the situation had been reversed, Gu Xianyuan was riding on the body of a lowly. This feeling was very subtle. While it made Gu Xianyuan feel awkward, it did indeed hide a wonderful sense of comfort. Of course, Gu Xianyuan was riding on Kong Na's body not because of some special hobby, but because Kong Na's body shape was the same as Gu Xianyuan's, so Gu Xianyuan could more easily launch a fierce attack on Adam. Kong Na in her lowly form was not as strong as Kong Na in her dragon form, but there was not too much of a drop. Her speed and strength were also at the level of flood level Yuan Ko. As Gu Xianyuan's mount, Kong Na could still provide a huge boost to Gu Xianyuan's ability. And for Gu Xianyuan, the most important thing was that Gu Xianyuan became very flexible. Don't look at how powerful dragon knights were in novels. Actually, it was completely bullshit. Imagine yourself sitting on top of a mountain and wanting to launch an attack on another mountain. You would know how ridiculous it was. Unless your knight's spear was a few kilometers long, you wouldn't even know if you could hit your enemy. It was like a 3 or 4-year-old boy's little brother entering the body of a seasoned European or American woman. It would feel empty inside without any feeling. When a human rode on the back of a dragon, the role of the human itself became very insignificant. At most, it would be like Gu Xianyuan just now, secretly commanding the dragon to fight. If a human wanted to help the dragon in battle, it would be almost like a fantasy. However, once Kong Na transformed into the same size as Gu Xianyuan, becoming the size that a real mount should have, then the strength of a giant dragon would be fully displayed. Firstly, Gu Xianyuan's speed would be terrifyingly enhanced. Kong Na in her lowly form would be able to reach a terrifying speed of 10 times the speed of sound. This speed was 20 times Gu Xianyuan's maximum speed. This would allow a swordsman who was extremely skilled in swordsmanship to possess extreme speed. This way, the effect of 1 + 1 wouldn't be as simple as 2. Moreover, Kong Na could attach her thunder and lightning to Gu Xianyuan's immortal Slayer Sword, so that apart from its own attribute, the immortal Slayer Sword had an additional layer of powerful thunder and lightning effect. Therefore, everyone saw this scene. Gu Xianyuan and Kong Na's silhouettes had completely left the range of human vision. They could only see innumerable lightning bolts constantly revolving around Adam. Almost in an instant, Adam's body was riddled with innumerable wounds, and every wound was flickering with golden lightning bolts. While causing tremendous damage to Adam, it was also able to prevent Adam's astonishing regeneration ability from automatically healing. At this moment, Adam's greatest weakness was revealed. As one of the purest humans, Adam could still not be affected by the ring of logic. He could purely use his purest strength to cause tremendous damage to everything around him. However, once he faced a powerful supernatural ability, his pure strength would become limited. If it was any other Flood-class Yuan Ko, he could release a powerful area of effect attack around him, or simply an unavoidable attack that would definitely hit him. This way, he could at least deal with Gu Xianyuan and Kong Na's fighting style. Unfortunately, Adam didn't have such strength. He could only use his hands to helplessly swat that annoying fly like a human swatting a fly. Under normal circumstances, after 20 to 30 attempts, a human might be able to swat that damned fly once or twice. However, once this fly possessed supersonic speed, wanting to swat such a fly would become extremely laughable. This was simply an impossible task. To be honest, such a battle was quite boring. People couldn't even see how the one who took the initiative to attack. They could only see that Adam had no ability to resist at all. He was constantly passively enduring the attacks. More and more wounds appeared on his body, and in the end, he became weaker and weaker. He no longer had the awe-inspiring, imposing manner of Ling. In this way, Adam's vitality was constantly depleted by the combination of Gu Xianyuan and Kong Na. In less than 20 minutes, a lake of blood appeared under Adam's feet. After draining the last drop of blood from his body, he fell straight to the ground and closed his pale yellow, turbid eyes. A dimensional vortex began to appear and absorb Adam's body. This time, Adam was truly dead. He became the first Flood-class Yuan Ko to die in the hands of Gu Xianyuan. Not counting the Nether River Patriarch, he was a Desolate-class Yuan Ko. After Adam's body completely returned, Gu Xianyuan finally exited from her lightning state and rode on Kong Na's neck back to the city wall of the core zone. Phew, it's a little more tiring than I thought. Don't look at how he died in the hands of Gu Xianyuan without any ability to fight back. In fact, Gu Xianyuan did not have it easy. Kong Na's speed far exceeded Gu Xianyuan's usual speed. Gu Xianyuan had to be fully focused and highly focused in order to barely be able to fight at 20 times the speed of sound. Every minute was a huge test for Gu Xianyuan. It was more than a few times more difficult than the test of the 12 skyscraping temples in the game. Therefore, when Gu Xianyuan once again appeared in front of everyone, her body was completely soaked in sweat. Her clothes were tightly stuck to her body under the absorption of the sweat, reflecting a perfect body full of youthful energy. At this moment, the entire core zone wall was filled with the smell of hormones. And Gu Xianyuan immediately noticed this smell. As a man, Gu Xianyuan naturally hated this smell. Therefore, she immediately released the sword chi in her body and pushed up all the clothes stuck to her body. At the same time, the sword chi quickly rubbed against her clothes, producing a huge amount of heat that quickly evaporated the sweat in her clothes. In just the blink of an eye, Gu Xianyuan's soaked clothes became extremely dry again. Sigh, what a pity. If only I could look at her a few more times. Everyone sighed in their hearts. It was a pity that such a beautiful sight could only be seen for a short while, and could not be enjoyed for a long time. Sword Immortal Ling Su looked at Gu Xianyuan with a complicated expression. He had thought that Gu Xianyuan was only planning to lure Adam out of the normal zone, and then use Kong Na to end the battle outside of Yuzhong City. But he did not expect to be slapped in the face again in the end. Gu Xianyuan actually killed Adam in the city. At the same time, what was even more frightening was that Gu Xianyuan had kept the entire battlefield within an area of less than 1 square kilometer. Although all the land within this 1 square kilometer had been turned into ruins, other areas were safe and sound, unaffected by Adam's torment. This was already the best result for Yuzhong City. Otherwise, even if Adam was lured out of the city, there would probably be countless high-rise buildings destroyed in the battle along the way, just like when Adam came. How strong is this Gu Xianyuan's combat strength? Sword Immortal Ling Su's eyes wandered as he thought to himself. The fact that Gu Xianyuan has combat strength equivalent to an immortal sword rank sword wielder is already undeniable. What sort of mortal Ling Su is really doubtful about is whether Gu Xian Yuan has the combat strength of a Hong-level Yuan Ko, which is an Emperor's Sword rank sword wielder. Gu Xian Yuan didn't have it, but there were indeed two Hong-level Yuan Ko who had fallen in Gu Xian Yuan's hands. But even if Gu Xian Yuan had the combat strength of an Emperor's Sword rank sword wielder, these two victories were not entirely based on Gu Xian Yuan's own strength. The previous victory over Kong Na was because Kong Na was too hungry, and she was seriously injured by Wang Shu Sword's all-out attack. As for defeating Adam this time, one reason was that Adam's weakness was too obvious, and the other was that Gu Xian Yuan could also rely on Kong Na's strength to do so. From this, it could be seen that there was still a gap between Gu Xian Yuan's combat strength and that of a Hong-level Yuan Ko. Forget it. Let's not think about this troublesome problem. The stronger Gu Xian Yuan was, the better it would be for Yuzhong City. This was for sure. Cough, cough. Miss Xian Yuan, shouldn't you come down now? Right at this time, Misaka Mikoto suddenly coughed and looked at the little lowly Kong Na who was riding under Gu Xian Yuan's crotch. Gu Xian Yuan grabbed Kong Na who was under her crotch and pulled her into her arms. What? Kong Na, who was pulled out, was still a little dissatisfied. She pouted and said, I haven't had enough of being ridden. Chapter 1142. A total of 1623 sword-bearers died. 3,654 sword-bearers lost their ability to fight. 7,213 sword maidens were lost, and 4,002 sword maidens were unable to be repaired, including 3 natural sword maidens. Ancient Sword Maiden's Spring Wind Sword, Ancient Sword Maiden's Sea Snake Sword, and Treasure Sword Maiden's Guanghan Sword. A total of 237,261 ordinary human casualties were found. 196,213 relatively intact bodies were found. 35217 unidentifiable bodies were found, and 5,371 bodies were completely missing. Among them, 215,637 people died in battle. 100761 died in the battle to defend the city walls in the normal area. 114917 died in the battle to defend the city walls in the core area, of which 56,238 died in the battle to defend the wall of flesh and blood. A total of 2,271 buildings were lost in battle in the normal area, among which 1062 buildings were completely destroyed, 1211 buildings required urgent repair, and about 1.03 million residents were left homeless, currently temporarily resettled in various shelters. A total of 21 buildings were lost in battle in the core area. All residents have been properly resettled. A total of 163 damaged areas were found in the outer city walls. The total damaged area is 12.7 kilometers long. A total of 38 damaged areas were found in the core area. The total damaged area is 1.9 kilometers long. Apart from buildings, a total of 1,360 billion renminbi was lost in various economic products in the normal area, including 830 billion renminbi was lost in the private economy, and 630 billion renminbi was lost in public property. Food and other daily necessities were moved in time, and all of them were well preserved. There were no large-scale losses, which can last for 10 years and 6 months. Sword Immortal Ling Su stared at the piles and piles of data in front of him with a headache. This was the second day after the battle had ended. Yuzhong City's response speed could be considered quite fast. In the short span of a day, they had accurately calculated all of the property losses and reported it to Sword Immortal Ling Su's desk. Looking at these shocking losses, Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't appear to be very sad, and there was even a hint of a smile on his face. This wasn't because Sword Immortal Ling Su was heartless, but because these losses were much smaller than Sword Immortal Ling Su had expected. According to Sword Immortal Ling Su's original plan, the entire Yuzhong City would be completely destroyed in this sudden attack. By then, the total losses would be tens or even hundreds of times greater than the current losses. After all, by then, the entire Yuzhong City would no longer exist. The remaining humans would probably still be slowly advancing on the long road of escape. If the current losses were equivalent to cutting off a piece of Yuzhong City's flesh, then the losses that Sword Immortal Ling Su envisioned were equivalent to a death by 1,000 cuts. Sword Immortal Ling Su was already very satisfied with this result. The foundation of Yuzhong City was still intact, and it would only take 3 to 4 years at most for these losses to be recovered, and Yuzhong City could also be rebuilt. Under his leadership, Yuzhong City did not suffer the complete destruction of the previous few major invasions. It's all thanks to Miss Gu Xianyuan this time. Sword Immortal Ling Su knew very well that the reason why Yuzhong City had been able to escape this calamity had nothing to do with him. The true culprit was that young mistress Gu Xianyuan who had suddenly appeared. If it wasn't for Gu Xianyuan, then what awaited Yuzhong City would have been the latter outcome. Speaking of which, I really can't bear to part with her. Young mistress Gu Xianyuan actually left just like that. I didn't even properly thank her once. What made Sword Immortal Ling Su feel a little ashamed was that after the battle was completely over, Gu Xianyuan didn't stay in Yuzhong City for even a single night. She directly left Yuzhong City in the afternoon. Gu Xianyuan didn't say why she was in such a hurry to leave, but Sword Immortal Ling Su could vaguely guess some of it. It was nothing more than Shi Juyuan's life and Lu Sihua, who he had sent to London. After the battle in Yuzhong City, Gu Xianyuan must have been very worried about her younger brother's disciple, so she hurried over to bring Lu Sihua back. Thinking of this, Sword Immortal Ling Su felt waves of guilt welling up at his heart. If he hadn't conspired with Shi Juyuan back then, how could Shi Juyuan have the authority to directly send away a Sword Pavilion Lord? These were all mistakes he made when his desire for power clouded his mind. Sword Immortal Ling Su had also told Gu Xianyuan before that he hoped to set off with Gu Xianyuan and bring Lu Sihua back. But Gu Xianyuan refused. In her words, there were still a lot of troubles in Yuzhong City that needed Sword Immortal Ling Su to resolve, so it was best for Sword Immortal Ling Su to stay in Yuzhong City. This was the result she wanted to see. Gu Xianyuan was speaking the truth, so Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't insist anymore. He could only watch as Gu Xianyuan left Yuzhong City alone under the setting sun. But this young mistress, Gu Xianyuan, really left me with a huge problem. After expressing his longing and gratitude for Gu Xianyuan, Sword Immortal Ling Su couldn't help but fall into a state of distress. There was no other reason than that Gu Xianyuan left him with a huge problem. The lightning dragon, Kong Na Kamui. According to Gu Xianyuan, Kong Na had made a deal with Yuzhong City. Every month, Yuzhong City would give Kong Na enough high-purity nuclear fuel rods to consume, and Kong Na would also become the protector of Yuzhong City. Kong Na's trading partners were all in Yuzhong City, so Kong Na should naturally also live in Yuzhong City, and not by her side. Sword Immortal Ling Su was very conflicted about this. Kong Na was a flood-level Yuan Ko. If she could wholeheartedly fight to protect Yuzhong City, then it would naturally be a great thing for Yuzhong City. But the problem was that Kong Na was still a Yuan Ko after all, and they were both natural enemies of humans. Although she was living well in the city now, if she suddenly went berserk and suddenly wreaked havoc in the city, then Yuzhong City would be caught off guard and very likely suffer far greater losses than yesterday. Actually, the best solution was to let Kong Na find a place to stay outside of Yuzhong City. That way, even if they went berserk, they wouldn't cause great harm to Yuzhong City itself. Moreover, if Yuzhong City was attacked, she could also appear at the first instance to protect Yuzhong City. Unfortunately, this suggestion was rejected by Kong Na. After eating a meal of red braised pork at Chanel, she completely refused to leave the core area. Moreover, she brazenly expressed that even if she was chased out of the core area, she would try her best to come back. For example, she would launch an attack on Yuzhong City's super-dimensional protection system a few days ago, and so on. Sword Immortal Ling Su and Gu Xianyuan had no choice but to agree to let Kong Na stay in the core area. However, both of them had to bring along sealing equipment to seal off their own powers. At the same time, Gu Xianyuan arranged for them to stay in the Phoenix House, which was also the house of Gu Xianyuan's younger brother, Gahan, in the core area. It was stipulated that Kong Na was not allowed to leave Mount Emperor without the approval of the Sword Committee headquarters. At the same time, Sword Immortal Ling Su also promised Kang Na that he would send about a ton of various delicacies every day as the price for her to obediently stay in Mount Emperor as a foodie. After that, Misaka Makoto privately told Sword Immortal Ling Su not to worry too much about Kang Na. She told Sword Immortal Ling Su that the impurities in Kang Na's body had completely disappeared. At this time, Kang Na could not be considered as Yuan Ko. At most, she was just a lazy little female dragon. As long as she was fed well every day, there would not be too much of a problem. As for Erlang Shun, Yang Jian, this fellow immediately returned to his Erlang Shun temple at the mouth of the Guan River after the battle. However, Erlang Shun, Yang Jian, promised Sword Immortal Ling Su that within 3 years, as long as Sword Immortal Ling Su sent someone to Erlang Shun temple to send him a message, regardless of the reason, he would immediately rush to Yuzhong City and fight to protect Yuzhong City. Regarding this, Sword Immortal Ling Su secretly thanked the heavens and earth. If Erlang Shun, Yang Jian, was like Kang Na and stubbornly refused to leave the core area, then Sword Immortal Ling Su really would not be able to do anything to Erlang Shun, Yang Jian. However, Kang Na's problem was only one of the bigger ones. There was still an even bigger problem, and that was the Ring of Law that was currently hovering in the sky above Yuzhong City. After capturing Ling Boli and Asuka, the Fusang celestial system should have been completely defeated. This Ring of Law should have immediately returned to Fusang Island and left the territory of Yuzhong City. However, this Ring of Law seemed to have decided that Yuzhong City was its home. It stayed in the sky above Yuzhong City and did not go anywhere else. As a result, all supernatural forces within 500 kilometers of Yuzhong City were still in a state of lockdown. It was a very awkward situation. Yuzhong City could not do anything to the Ring of Law, even if it was Sword Immortal Ling Su. As long as he left the protection of Yuzhong City's superdimensional wall system, he would immediately become a mortal who had lost his sword essence. There was no way he could do anything to the Ring of Law in the sky. Moreover, according to the analysis of the Ring of Law by the research department, this Ring of Law was not a physical entity, but an existence that existed between spirit and rules. Against such an existence, even if it was Jindi, he would not be able to do anything. Unless this Jindi was the Jindi who was proficient in rules, then he would be able to forcibly expel the Ring of Law. In short, this was a message to Sword Immortal Ling Su that unless this Ring of Law wanted to leave on its own, it could stay in the sky above Yuzhong City as long as it wanted. Even Long Shurjindi would not be able to expel the Ring of Law. Sword Immortal Ling Su thought about it again. This Ring of Law did not seem to be too bad for Yuzhong City. The effect of the Ring of Law was also effective for Yuan Ko. On the contrary, humans who had the protection of the superdimensional wall system could instead use their own power freely through the superdimensional wall system. In this way, even if Yuan Ko gathered an army several times larger than before, he would not be able to break through Yuzhong City's defenses. Yuzhong City was many times safer than it would be without the Ring of Law. From a certain perspective, this Ring of Law could be considered as the guardian of Yuzhong City. However, there were other problems as well. Yuzhong City itself could not support the 40 million people in Yuzhong City. Yuzhong City had to make full use of the land around Yuzhong City for farming, mining, industry, and other things in order to support the 40 million people in Yuzhong City. Previously, Yuzhong City relied on the protection of the sword bearers to establish an absolute safety zone of about 200 kilometers. However, once the sword bearers left Yuzhong City, they would become ordinary people. The idea of relying on the sword bearers to protect the surroundings of Yuzhong City became an unrealistic delusion. Thus, the only people who could protect the surroundings of Yuzhong City were the ordinary people themselves. Chapter 1143. In the first few days, Sword Immortal Ling Su was still hopeful that the Ring of Perfection would leave on its own. However, after a month had passed, the Ring of Perfection had not moved at all, and Sword Immortal Ling Su's hopes were dashed. Then, Misaka Makoto sent news to Yuzhong City. The 200-level Yuan Ko from the Fusang Celestial System proposed a negotiation with the Freedom Metropolis. As long as Yuzhong City released Ling Boli and Ming Rixiang, the Fusang Celestial System was willing to remove the Ring of Perfection floating above Yuzhong City. Otherwise, the Ring of Perfection would remain above Yuzhong City until Ling Boli and Ming Rixiang were released. Ling Boli was the main culprit behind the deaths of more than 200,000 people in Yuzhong City. Of these 200,000 people, more than 100,000 died directly at the hands of Ling Boli's robot, Atom. Yuzhong City had long been filled with anger towards Ling Boli and Ming Rixiang. If it was not for the sake of research, Ming Rixiang and Ling Boli would have been executed by Sword Immortal Ling Su in public. Taking Ling Boli for research was a reasonable outcome that the people could accept. However, if Ling Boli and Ming Rixiang were used in exchange, the people of Yuzhong City would definitely tear themselves apart. Moreover, if they released Ling Boli because of such a threat, then the Fuso Divine System would make trouble for Yuzhong City in a few days and order Yuzhong City to pay all kinds of prices. Wouldn't Yuzhong City become an out-and-out rich idiot? After careful consideration, Sword Immortal Ling Su righteously rejected the Fusang Celestial System's request, and the Ring of Perfection would remain above Yuzhong City's head. As such, how to effectively deal with the threat posed by the Ring of Perfection in the long run had become a problem that Sword Immortal Ling Su had to solve. At this time, Sword Immortal Ling Su thought of the hot weapons that could shine in battle. Under the illumination of the Ring of Perfection, the power of hot weapons was fully displayed. Even the most elite Yuan Ko army was utterly defeated in the face of hot weapons, and they were forced to retreat by the humans. When the sword-bearers lost their strength outside the city, firearms could perfectly fill the gap left by the sword-bearers. It could even be said that the firearms were superior to the sword-bearers. Before this, due to the limited number of sword-bearers, Yuan Ko could often sneak into the vicinity of Yuzhong City and cause great harm to the people working there. However, once ordinary people and firearms were used, this drawback would no longer exist. With Yuzhong's industrial system operating at full capacity, Yuzhong could produce 100,000 firearms in a month. In a year, they could arm 1 million soldiers. Coupled with 1 million firearms left behind, Yuzhong City could have an army of 2 million soldiers. These 2 million soldiers could build a ring of fortifications around Yuzhong City, and the area within 500 kilometers around Yuzhong City would be impregnable. Not even a single Yuan Ko would be able to invade Yuzhong City through the defensive line, and the surroundings of Yuzhong City would be completely safe. What was even more amazing was that the recruitment of 2 million soldiers did not affect Yuzhong City's own productivity. Yuzhong City's population was surplus to begin with, and the labor force it really needed was only 3 to 4 million. In all of Yuzhong City, there were about 7 to 8 million able-bodied males who stayed at home with nothing to do. They could only rely on Yuzhong City's living allowance and fight in the game to kill their time and excess energy. However, this was undoubtedly a huge, unstable factor for society. Now, the most unstable 2 million of these 7 to 8 million able-bodied males were selected and sent into the army to undergo rigorous military training. The security level of Yuzhong City would be raised by who knew how many times. From a certain perspective, this was a good thing for everyone. Therefore, at this moment, there was a detailed plan drawn up by the elite advisors of the Sword Committee headquarters in front of Sword Immortal Ling Su. According to the plan drawn up on this plan, Yuzhong City would use a year's time to manufacture all kinds of firearms and equipment, build fortifications around Yuzhong City, and train a regular firearm army of 2 million soldiers. In this way, Yuzhong City's security would be impregnable, and there would be nothing to worry about. Sword Immortal Ling Su immediately approved this plan, but he couldn't help but recall what Gu Xianyuan had said to him before she left. Sword Immortal Ling Su still remembered that when Gu Xianyuan said these words to him, Her expression was very serious and even a little fearful. These troops must be disbanded immediately. Gu Xinyuan said resolutely and decisively. All firearms must be taken back immediately, and these people must be forbidden from touching firearms for life. At the same time, those ordinary people who temporarily hold military power should be commended, rewarded with citizenship, or given certain special privileges and rights. In short, we just have to hang them up high and let them be idols. We must not allow them to have any unrealistic thoughts, especially that Zhao Chenfeng. I suggest that he be given a grand commendation and participate in all kinds of variety shows every day. After that, we should give him the status of a council member. In short, let him be immersed in endless vanity and quarrels, and not give him any more opportunities to touch firearms or troops. Sword Immortal Ling Su remembered that Gu Xinyuan had warned him about firearms many times, far more than she had warned him about other aspects. And there was only one central idea in these words. Firearms troops were an extremely dangerous thing. This time, it was only because of Yuzhong City's crisis that they had no choice but to disband firearms troops immediately after this. At the same time, all topics related to firearms must be suppressed in public. Yuzhong City would never need firearms troops, and this was a huge threat to Yuzhong City. Isn't Miss Xian Yuan a little too conservative? It feels a bit like those stubborn conservatives in those novels who hold on to their ancestors' things and refuse to let go. Sword Immortal Ling Su actually didn't quite agree with Gu Xuanyuan's advice. He was very clear why Gu Xinyuan was worried. She was worried that when ordinary people mastered martial power, they would attack and retaliate against the sword-bearers, thereby causing chaos in the entire society. But Sword Immortal Ling Su only felt that Gu Xinyuan was making a big fuss over a minor issue. Did Gu Xinyuan not see how those ordinary people used their own flesh and blood to block the enemy's attack at the last moment of Yuzhong City? What wonderful companions and comrades they were. All of them were willing to shed their blood for Yuzhong City. Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't believe that such a group of hot-blooded men would eventually become the scourge of Yuzhong City. Moreover, whether or not these troops would rebel depended on who was in control. As long as all the middle and high-ranking officers in the troops were controlled by sword-bearers, then the control of the troops would be very stable. Even if some ordinary ambitious people wanted to cause trouble, they wouldn't be able to do so. As for that Zhao Chenfeng, Sword Immortal Ling Su could indeed sense that this guy was filled with ambition, the ambition to climb up the ranks. But which youngster these days didn't have ambition? Wasn't he, Sword Immortal Ling Su, also filled with ambition in the past? If he, Sword Immortal Ling Su, didn't have ambition, then he wouldn't have been able to reach the level of a Sword Immortal. Of course, the command of the firearms troops couldn't be given to this Zhao Chenfeng. Sword Immortal Ling Su also decided to respect Gu Xuanyuan's opinion and remove Zhao Chenfeng from the direct command position, not allowing him to directly command the troops. But this Zhao Chenfeng was indeed a very talented person. In the entire Yuzhong City, there was no one more proficient in firearms than him. It would be too much of a pity to let him become a member of the council who would wrangle with others all day long. After a period of careful consideration, Sword Immortal Ling Su decided to establish a firearms military academy. Then he appointed Zhao Chenfeng as the principal of this military academy. This was a perfect opportunity to make use of his strengths and help Yuzhong City cultivate a group of military talents who were proficient in firearms. Of course, this was a decision to be made a month later. Right now, Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't have time to consider such a complicated matter. Finally, everything has been settled. Sword Immortal Ling Su let out a long sigh of relief when he saw that the mountainous pile of documents in front of him had all been approved. His busy day had finally come to an end. Just as Sword Immortal Ling Su was preparing to go back to rest, a series of heavy knocks on his door gave him a fright. Who is it? Who dares to directly knock on my door? Sword Immortal Ling Su's expression turned a little ugly when he heard the knocks on his door. The standard procedure to see Sword Immortal Ling Su was to make an appointment in advance and then send a message through his own mystic technique. He would directly knock on his office door like this, although the door was meant for people to knock in the first place. "Come in." Sword Immortal Ling Su wanted to see just who was so daring. In the end, a man rushed in with an anxious expression on his face. This man was about 30 years old and had a dignified appearance. He exuded the aura of a noble young master. However, his face was pale and his steps were unsteady. It was clear that this noble young master didn't know how to control his desires normally. I was wondering who it was. So it's third young master, sure. Sword Immortal Ling Su recognized this noble young master. This person was none other than Shi Jiyuan's third son, the fellow known as third young master Shi. Shi Jiyuan had 3 sons. His first son died a few days after being born. Apparently, he was born with a congenital deficiency that even the medical pod couldn't cure. His second son lived until he was 12 years old. However, at such a young age, he didn't learn good things. He wanted to use his status to screw his beautiful teacher. In the end, this beautiful teacher had a sword wielder's boyfriend. This sword wielder didn't care about Shi Jiyuan at all and directly killed the little brat. Then, he ran off to Yanjing City. Because this sword wielder had a recording of second young master Shi forcing himself on his girlfriend, and Yanjing City wasn't a place that cared about Shi Jiyuan, this sword wielder was sentenced to guard the beacon for 5 years. Right now, he was still living a carefree life. Therefore, the third young master of the Shi clan was Shi Jiyuan's last remaining descendant, and he was also spoiled to the extreme by Shi Jiyuan. He was treated like a child in the palm of his hand, afraid that he would fall, and in the mouth of his mouth, afraid that he would melt. He was a famous bastard in Yuzhong City. Shi Jiyuan had brought him to see Sword Immortal Ling Su a few times, and he had even shamelessly asked Sword Immortal Ling Su to take care of the third young master of the Shi clan. Looks like this idiot already knows that his old man is gone. Seeing third young master Shi's anxious expression, Sword Immortal Ling Su knew that the news of Shi Jiyuan's death could no longer be hidden. Chapter 1144. Lord Ling Su, my father has gone missing. I've searched the entire Yuzhong City, but I couldn't find him. In the end, I asked the headquarters of the Sword Committee, and they told me that my father's life signal has already stopped responding. They said that my father is dead. Is this true? Third young master Shi asked anxiously. Saying this, Sword Immortal Ling Su couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Actually, third young master Shi had already asked him about Shi Jiyuan a few days ago, but he was deceived by Sword Immortal Ling Su. Third young master Shi saw that he was being thwarted by Sword Immortal Ling Su, so he could only ask the Sword Committee headquarters about Shi Jiyuan. After all, Shi Jiyuan was the head of the Emperor's sword family. His life and death was something that the Sword Committee headquarters had to pay attention to. Therefore, the Sword Committee headquarters would take the initiative to investigate Shi Jiyuan's situation. This way, Sword Immortal Ling Su couldn't deceive them. Previously, Sword Immortal Ling Su kept the news of Shi Jiyuan's death in Yuzhong City, and the information was also kept in Yuzhong City. He didn't report it to the Sword Committee headquarters. However, the Sword Committee headquarters had the highest authority in the human world. They had the right to access all the information stored in Yuzhong City's highest-level AI system. Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't have the right or ability to stop them. The news of Shi Jiyuan's death could no longer be hidden. Since the Sword Committee headquarters said that your father's personal terminal has lost its signal, then your father's personal terminal has really lost its signal. He's probably dead, Sword Immortal Ling Su said calmly. But that's not what you told me a few days ago. Didn't you tell my father that he only went missing in the battle with Yuan Ko? Didn't you tell me that he might still be alive? Third young master Shi couldn't suppress his emotions and roared. Watch your tone, Shi Tianshou. Sword Immortal Ling Su slammed the table a few times in dissatisfaction. You're now facing the chairman of the Yuzhong City Sword Committee, a mighty, immortal sword-tier sword wielder. As an ancient sword-tier sword wielder, have you forgotten the etiquette between superiors and subordinates? He scolded with a look of disgust. You? I. Sure Tianshou was third young Master Shi's real name. When he heard Sword Immortal Ling Su say his name out loud, third young Master Shi knew that things were a little different from what he had expected. Yuzhong City was no longer the Yuzhong City of a few days ago. My apologies, Lord Ling Su, I was rude. Third young Master Shi lowered his head. As a child who has lost his father, I want to know how his current condition is. How'd he die? Didn't you already go to the Sword Committee to ask? Didn't they tell you how your father died? Is there need to ask me? Sword Immortal Ling Su looked at third young Master Shi with a teasing expression. It's that woman. It's that beautiful bitch who killed my father, isn't it? Third young Master Shi's face turned hideous. Why? You already knew that my father died in the hands of that bitch. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't he arrest her right away? Avenge my father? You better watch your mouth. Sword Immortal Ling Su scolded again. She is the savior of Yuzhong City. If it weren't for her, everyone in Yuzhong City, including you, would have died. She is not only your savior, but also the savior of the entire Yuzhong City. You must make this clear to me, or I will definitely make you bear the corresponding consequences. Bah, I don't need her to save me. The third young master of the Shi family spat. Our family has already packed up everything, and there are several spirit sword bearers protecting us. We can hide in Yinjing City anytime, anywhere. We don't need that bitch to save us. Shameless scum. Hearing third young Master Shi blatantly say that his family had already packed everything, and was even preparing to recruit spirit sword level sword bearers to protect them as they escaped, Sword Immortal Ling Su could no longer contain his anger. He directly slapped third young Master Shi across the face. Third young Master Shi's entire body spun 360 degrees in the air and finally fell straight to the ground with a crisp thud. This is the reason why Miss Xianyuan killed your father. Based on your father's cowardly attitude of wanting to abandon the lives of 40 million people in Yuzhong City, even if Miss Xianyuan didn't do anything, I, Sword Immortal Ling Su, would have killed him and gotten rid of this scum, Sword Immortal Ling Su said in a powerful voice. Heh, you finally admitted that you conspired with that bitch to kill my father. You're also one of the murderers. Third young Master Shi clutched his face that was swollen like a piece of bread. Whatever you say. Sword Immortal Ling Su had a look of disdain on his face. Who cared about such things? Oof. Let me tell you, Sword Immortal Ling Su, I've already recorded our entire conversation today. I'm going to share this conversation with all the Spirit Sword rank sword bearers and have them uphold justice for my father. The third young master of the Shi family yelled. Justice. Sword Immortal Ling Su seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. You actually have the face to talk about justice with me? Then go ahead. Go tell all the Spirit Sword level sword bearers what you said to me. Let's see whose side justice they're on. I'll send it to them right now. Third young master Shi panicked. Without another word, he took out his personal terminal and began to send messages to all the Spirit Sword level sword bearers stored in his personal terminal. But what happened next shocked third young Master Shi. When he clicked to send a message, his personal terminal didn't give him the usual notification that the message had been delivered. Instead, it told him this. Sorry, you're not the other party's friend and cannot send a message. Why? Why aren't we friends anymore? We were just eating together a few days ago. Seeing this notification, third young Master Shi was completely enraged. He couldn't accept this result at all. On the other hand, Sword Immortal Ling Su was well aware of this result. In reality, immediately after the battle, Sword Immortal Ling Su had called for a meeting with all the Spirit Sword level sword bearers. As for the specific content of the meeting, no one revealed it. But the first thing these Spirit Sword level sword bearers did after the meeting was to delete third young Master Shi's friend list. After all, Shi Juiyuan was already dead. These Spirit Sword level sword bearers knew very well what kind of person third young Master Shi was. He was someone who couldn't do anything right, who would be willing to suck up to him. They just hoped that he wouldn't spread the fire to them. Dong! Right at this moment, Sword Immortal Ling Su's personal terminal suddenly emitted a crisp and pleasant sound. Sword Immortal Ling Su closed his eyes and looked at this message. A bitter smile appeared on his face. The arrest warrant has been issued. Take a look. Sword Immortal Ling Su projected this message in the air. Third young Master Shi raised his head and saw that this was a notification letter returned from the Sword Committee headquarters. Yuzhong City Sword Committee, we have received your notification regarding the death of Spirit Sword level sword bearer Shi Juan. After verification, Shi Juan did die at the hands of a female sword bearer. However, because the female sword bearer's personal terminal has been destroyed and her DNA information cannot be collected, no one matching the appearance of all the female sword bearers can be found. The criminal is temporarily determined to be an unknown female. At the same time, regarding the criminal named Gu Xianyuan that you reported, after comparison with the system's database, there is no female sword bearer named Gu Xianyuan in the database. This criminal is actually out of all the database, and the Sword Committee headquarters is unable to confirm her detailed identity. However, the Sword Committee headquarters will not tolerate any kind of fratricide. After a meeting of the Sword Committee headquarters, this criminal has been named Gu Xianyuan. At the same time, due to the highest level arrest warrant for the 8 cities that have been issued globally, any sword bearer who discovers the criminal Gu Xianyuan must immediately report it to their respective sword committee. If the criminal is too strong, it is not recommended that normal sword bearers arrest her. The arrest shall be carried out by the discipline committee of each base. December 12, 3011. World Sword Bearers Joint Committee Conference. This is... Third young Master Shi looked at the document and didn't know what to say. Looks like the Sword Committee headquarters reacted very quickly. I reported it to them yesterday, and they sent me a reply today. Sure enough, the death of an old man from the Emperor Sword family is a big deal. Sword Immortal Ling Su showed this reply to third young Master Shi to tell him that he, Sword Immortal Ling Su, did not make any mistakes in the procedure, and that he shouldn't say anything more. Then when does Sword Immortal Ling Su plan to send people to arrest this criminal? Third young Master Shi raised his head and asked, "Let's talk about this later. Right now, there's a lot of reconstruction work to be done in Yuzhong City, and Miss Gu Xuanyuan's strength is not weaker than mine. How can normal sword bearers catch her? Sending her would just be a waste of time. In a few months, when I'm free, I'll look for her myself and see if I can find Miss Gu Xianyuan." Sword Immortal Ling Su waved his hand. "All right, you can go now. To be honest, I don't really want to see you again." "You." The veins on third young Master Shi's face instantly bulged. Even an idiot could tell that Sword Immortal Ling Su was trying to brush him off. It would take a few more months before he could relax. Let's see if everyone has already forgotten about this matter after a few months. Thinking back to what Sword Immortal Ling Su had just said, Sword Immortal Ling Su didn't say that he was going to capture Gu Xianyuan. He only said that he was going to look for her. The meaning behind this was even more worth pondering. However, there was nothing wrong with Sword Immortal Ling Su's words. There were indeed a lot of things to be done in Yuzhong City, and now is not the time for Sword Immortal Ling Su to leave Yuzhong City. Third young Master Shi had nothing to criticize Sword Immortal Ling Su for. In the end, third young Master Shi could only clench his fists and silently leave Sword Immortal Ling Su's office. Only now did he fully understand what his father's death meant to him. "Come here for a moment." After third young Master Shi left, Sword Immortal Ling Su ordered a man in a suit and leather shoes to come in. Then he pulled out a large pile of photos from his dimensional space and handed them to this man. When this man saw the contents of these photos, he couldn't help but tremble. His face turned bright red. These photos were all of beautiful young girls whose bodies had been modified to look like animals. Their behavior was also completely similar to that of animals. And in the photos, third young Master Shi was smiling in an exceptionally happy and perverted manner. "Investigate all of this for me," Sword Immortal Ling Su said indifferently. "Yes," the man replied. Chapter 1145. Third young Master Shi had completely given up on Sword Immortal Ling Su to avenge his father. Under his instructions, dozens of public literati who were proficient in word games, as well as 20 to 30 large media outlets, and 2,000 to 3,000 personal media accounts simultaneously exposed the fact that Gu Xianyuan had murdered an amiable, kind, and benevolent old man. In the descriptions of these articles, Gu Xianyuan was uniformly described as a crazy and sick murderer, while Shi Juan was described as a kind, and broad-minded old man who did everything possible to protect Yuzhong City for the sake of the people. These articles could quickly bring the reader's emotions to Shi Juan's head, thus causing them to explode with endless anger towards the murderer, Gu Xianyuan. This was also the usual routine of the media. For a media person, stirring up the reader's emotions and guiding the reader's standpoint was the most basic skill. If they couldn't even master this skill, then they weren't qualified to be a media person. For a moment, the public on the internet was indignant. They all expressed their anger towards Gu Xianyuan and urged the Sword Commission to act quickly and bring this murderer to justice. However, these emotions only appeared on the internet in the other 7 cities. But in Yuzhong City, there was no market for such emotions. On the contrary, almost all the people of Yuzhong City stood on Gu Xianyuan's side. This was because all the people of Yuzhong City had seen Gu Xianyuan fight to the death for Yuzhong City. Without Gu Xianyuan, they would have been dead long ago. Even if Gu Xianyuan was really a heinous bastard, they would definitely stand on Gu Xianyuan's side. Moreover, for the people of Yuzhong City, everyone had a scale in their hearts. Everyone knew very well what kind of person Shi Juan was. Therefore, very quickly, the people of Yuzhong City spontaneously defended Gu Xianyuan on the internet. The way the people of Yuzhong City refuted was not like the media people that Third Young Master Shi had created. Most of them used simple words and videos. The people of Yuzhong City had a variety of ways to refute. In addition to the most basic verbal refutation and live video refutation, there were also animations, ridicule, music, and the like. The most famous of these was probably a video made by an author. At the beginning of the video, it fully showed the situation that Yuzhong City was facing at that time to the audience outside of Yuzhong City. It showed how Yuzhong City was on the verge of collapse, and the lives of 40 million people could be killed by Yuan Ko in the blink of an eye. It made the audience's hearts tighten to the extreme. In the middle of the video, the style of the scene changed. Gu Xianyuan appeared out of nowhere. Under the editing of this author, he used all kinds of tight, flashing, high-speed changing scenes, and all kinds of divine songs such as drawing swords, drawing guns, and nuclear explosions to make Gu Xianyuan's battle look impassioned. Everyone who saw this battle couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. Especially the last part where Gu Xianyuan rode on the giant dragon Kungana to fight with Adam. It directly made everyone's blood boil to the extreme, and their heads started to emit smoke. Of course, the author didn't edit the part where Kong Na turned into a loli. Otherwise, the whole scene would be too strange. And at the end of the video, the author even appeared in person and revealed his true face. He didn't hesitate to tell the audience about the real Shi Juan. Under the author's oral narration, the netizens learned that Shi Juan wasn't an ordinary old man, but the head of the Jindy family. At the same time, the author also talked about Shi Juan's craziness, selfishness, power struggle, harm to the people, bullying men and women, and so on. He completely overturned the image of Shi Juan that the media had created. This made the netizens in other cities a little confused. They didn't know who to believe and who was telling the truth. Later, a video of 300,000 people in Yuzhong City writing a blood letter was uploaded to the internet. These people volunteered to testify for Gu Xianyuan, proving that Shi Juan was indeed a bastard. Only then did the trend on the internet gradually turn to the side of Gu Xianyuan. Faced with this situation, Third Young Master Shi was naturally terrified. He could only continue to invest more resources and bribe more internet water armies to smear Gu Xianyuan's name and protect his father's image. But no matter how many internet water armies there were, how could they compare to the number of Yuzhong City netizens? The two sides fought each other on the internet and launched a huge debate. In half a month, the attention of the people in the 8 major Bay cities was focused on Gu Xianyuan and Shi Juan. In the end, even Third Young Master Shi couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. Finally, the debate was ended by a video released by the official account of Yuzhong City. This video didn't have any third-party narration. It was just a simple edit of some of what happened before Shi Jiyuan's death. This included how Shi Jiyuan persuaded Sword Immortal Ling Su to retreat, how he brazenly stated that it didn't matter if the 40 million people stayed in the sanctuary, as long as they could protect the swordsman, and how Shi Jiyuan coveted the treasures of the Sword Pavilion in Yuzhong City. After using despicable means to send Yuzhong City's Sword Pavilion Lord Lu Shihua away, how he wanted to devour the Sword Maiden in the Sword Pavilion. Finally, it was the scene before Shi Jiyuan's death. It was the conversation between Gu Xianyuan, Shi Jiyuan, and Sword Immortal Ling Su in the Sword Pavilion, as well as the scene of Gu Xianyuan killing Shi Jiyuan in the end. This video was shot from Sword Immortal Ling Su's point of view. Clearly, it was automatically recorded by Sword Immortal Ling Su with his personal terminal. The person who released this video was undoubtedly Sword Immortal Ling Su himself. Therefore, there was no reason to doubt the authenticity of this video. In this video, all the netizens thoroughly recognized Shi Jiyuan's true colors and knew what kind of bastard Shi Jiyuan was. The debate on the internet ended in an instant, and the third young master, Shi's internet water army, was defeated in an instant. Even many of the internet water army themselves jumped on the bandwagon and pretended to be innocent and deceived, condemning Shi Jiyuan along with others. At this point, Shi Jiyuan and the Shi family's reputation became a pile of garbage. It became unbearably stinky. Even the Shi family's former friends couldn't wait to cut ties with the Shi family. The Shi family, one of the largest Emperor Sword families in Yuzhong City, was instantly weakened. If it wasn't for the fact that the Shi family still had some foundation, they might not even be able to compare to the Yi family. Third young master Shi reaped what he sowed. If he didn't want to start a war on the internet to clear his father's name, all the netizens in Yuzhong City wouldn't have fought with him. In the end, even Sword Immortal Ling Su couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to stand on Gu Xianyuan's side, posting crucial evidence. However, the debate didn't end with the complete defeat of the Shi family's internet water army. The sharp-eyed netizens extracted two pieces of information that interested them. Firstly, this Gu Xianyuan was the former pavilion master of Yuzhong City, the guardian of the Sun Moon Star in Shanhai Pass, and one of the three great heroes. She had stripped off the clothes of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor's son, and was now the elder sister of the famous sword-ranked sword wielder Guhan, a wanted criminal. Alright, now that Gu Xianyuan had also become a wanted criminal, these two siblings were in the same boat. Second, Gu Xianyuan's beauty. Thanks to the wonderful things that the video creator had done, Gu Xianyuan's peerless beauty instantly attracted a large number of fans all over the world. All kinds of Gu Xianyuan's fan clubs, QQ groups, and fan alliances sprang up overnight. It was said that someone in Yuzhong City even created a Goddess Xianyuan sect, connecting Gu Xianyuan with the sun. They called Gu Xianyuan the sun goddess and worshipped Gu Xianyuan's portrait every day. As a result, a few months later, Gu Xianyuan suddenly emerged as a new force in the world's largest selection of the world's most beautiful goddess on the internet. With her well-deserved crushing strength, she completely crushed all the popular celebrities and was elected as the world's most beautiful woman. Of course, there were also some things that might make Gahan unhappy. Many manufacturers began to privately produce and sell Gu Xianyuan's albums, Gu Xianyuan's drawings, Gu Xianyuan's beautiful pictures, shirts with Gu Xianyuan's pictures printed on them, Gu Xianyuan's special figurines, the artist's upper body, with its own Opie mouse pad, Gu Xianyuan's full color book, and finally, Gu Xianyuan's inflatable dolls. That's right, in some romantic action movies, some women who look similar to Gu Xianyuan were specially invited to dress up like Gu Xianyuan. Then, they got a legal loli to play the role of Kong Na, and sent out an indescribable short movie. In any case, a wave of Gu Xianyuan's economy instantly flourished on the internet, lasting for a long time. It was not until after Gahan ascended to the throne that he specially launched an anti-pornography campaign, sweeping away all the illegal products related to Gu Xianyuan, that this damned Gu Xianyuan's economy was barely curbed. Of course, this was all in the future. Right now, Gu Xianyuan was completely unaware of this. She was currently chasing after Mu Shui and Lu Shihua, trying to save her disciple. At this time, it had already been 5 days since Mu Shui and Lu Shihua set out. If they maintained their top speed, Mu Shui and Lu Shihua should have already left the borders of Huaxia and arrived at the Middle East region, which was near Lengthen City. However, before leaving Yuzhong City, Gu Xianyuan had asked Sword Immortal Ling Su to contact Mu Shui's sword spirit and discovered that she was still in a region where the signal could not reach. This meant that Mu Shui's sword spirit had not yet passed through the signal isolation zone. At this time, she should be in the Xinjiang region of ancient Yanhuang, the ancient Pakistan region, the ancient Afghanistan region, and the ancient Iran region. Even though he had already ascertained the location of Mu Shui and the sword spirit, this region was simply too big. It was so big that even Gu Xianyuan could not make heads or tails of it. He could only follow the path that they would most likely take. I hope nothing happens to Shihua. Gu Xianyuan prayed in her heart. Chapter 1146. Because the flying droplet was running out of energy, Gu Xianyuan had no choice but to purchase a Yanhuang 3008 from Yuzhong City as his ride. He turned on the flying droplet and sped through the forest at an unimaginable speed. Very quickly, he arrived at the outermost area of Yuzhong City's signal coverage. This was also the last place Mu Shui and Lu Shihua had contacted Yuzhong City. Mu Shui, the sword spirit, and Lu Shihua had taken 4 days to arrive, but Gu Xianyuan had only taken 1 day. This showed how fast Gu Xianyuan was. Moreover, this was under the situation where Gu Xianyuan could only use one hand to drive, and the other hand could not be used because he was holding the Zhu Xian sword. However, there were many Yuan Ko in this area, and it was definitely not a suitable place to stay. Most sword bearers would choose to travel another 200 to 300 kilometers to Lanzhou City. After reaching Lanzhou City, they would use the ruins of Lanzhou City to set up camp and spend the night before continuing. The ruins of Lanzhou City are up ahead. There are 3 routes from Lanzhou City to London City. I wonder which route Lu Shihua and the rest took. Gu Xianyuan kept the Yanhuang 3008 in her dimensional pocket and looked at the vast and endless desert, muttering to herself in distress. 1,000 years later, unlike the world in the south that was completely occupied by all kinds of forests and trees, this was a world drowned in yellow sand from ancient Shaanxi province. The spread of desertification had never stopped, drowning the world that was originally full of life 1,000 years ago. Starting from Yan'an City in the northwest of ancient Shaanxi province, there was an astonishing stretch of yellow sand as far as the eye could see. This desert spread all the way to the Mediterranean Sea before it stopped. This was the largest desert on Earth 1,000 years later, spanning the entire Eurasian continent and occupying almost 1/5 of Asia. Lu Shihua and the rest signal had disappeared in Lanzhou City 3 days ago, which also meant that Lu Shihua and the rest had indeed reached Lanzhou City 3 days ago. Therefore, Gu Xianyuan could only hope to find some clues in the ruins of Lanzhou City and find the direction Lu Shihua and the rest had gone. It was not difficult to find clues about Lu Shihua and the rest. Gu Xianyuan drove the Yanhuang 3008 around all the suitable places to set up camp in Lanzhou City and found traces of people living in the ruins of a building that was leeward from the wind. There's a lot of food residue on the ground. Judging from the degree of decay, it should have been eaten 2 or 3 days ago. Gu Xianyuan analyzed the remaining bones on the ground, as well as things like fruit pits and the like, and made a judgment. These 2 places should be where they set up their tents. Since there are only 2 traces of tents, there should only be 2 people staying here, which is the same number as Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit. Why do I smell blood? Gu Xianyuan's nose suddenly wafted a bit of the smell of blood. Smelling these scents, Gu Xianyuan's heart tightened. Could it be that the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua were attacked here? There was a battle, and there were casualties? Without saying a word, Gu Xianyuan immediately followed the smell of blood. In the end, in the corner of the building ruins, she found two dark red pieces of thick cloth that looked like the flag of a certain country. Gu Xuanyuan's expression suddenly turned awkward. The smell of blood that she smelled actually came from the sanitary napkin. Looks like it can't be wrong. This is where the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua were camping. Although this discovery was awkward, it did have an important meaning. This meant that the two people who stayed here were both female, and for two female sword bearers to form a team, other than Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit, there was no other possibility. Gu Xianyuan could officially confirm that the people who had set up camp here were the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua. I need to search this place carefully and see if there are any clues that can confirm the next step of the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua. Gu Xianyuan thought to herself and began to search the entire building ruins inside and out. In the end, Gu Xianyuan was very disappointed. In the entire building ruins, Gu Xianyuan did not find any useful clues. This building ruins still had 5 floors, but other than some footprints on the 2nd floor, there were no signs of anyone entering the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. Clearly, the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua had only moved around the 1st and 2nd floors. On the 2nd floor, there were very few traces of activity. Only the 2nd floor's window had more footprints. It seemed like the two of them had checked the 2nd floor's window and confirmed that the surroundings were safe. Although there were many traces of activity on the 1st floor, they were all traces of daily life. There were no books, maps, notes, or other possible clues, which made Gu Xianyuan very disappointed. Just when Gu Xianyuan was about to give up, a strange trace suddenly entered Gu Xuanyuan's eyes. Gu Xianyuan noticed that this was a trace of food residue, some yellow, fine, unknown food residue. This is... Gu Xianyuan squatted on the ground and hesitated for a moment. Then she picked up the largest residue, blew the dust off it, and placed it in her mouth to chew. Finally, she confirmed it's actually the residue of instant noodles. Logically speaking, there was nothing strange about this. Even after 1,000 years, instant noodles were still a favorite travel food of every sword wielder. Almost every sword wielder would have some instant noodles stored in their dimensional pockets, so it was very normal for there to be instant noodle residue left behind. However, such a normal thing became abnormal in the eyes of Gu Xianyuan. The residue of the instant noodles was not the residue of the instant noodles that had been soaked in water, but the residue of the instant noodles that had been directly eaten. Everyone must have eaten dry instant noodles before, and they also knew that when eating dry instant noodles, there would inevitably be some fine residue falling from a mouth, just like the instant noodles residue that appeared in front of Gu Xianyuan at this time. Gu Xianyuan had lived with Lu Shihua for a month, so she had some understanding of Lu Shihua's small habits. Gu Xianyuan clearly knew that Lu Shihua's character was very conservative, and she also abided by the rules. The biggest manifestation of this character was that when Lu Shihua walked, she would definitely walk on the sidewalk and would not even cross the edge of the sidewalk. When she slept, she would definitely sleep from the head of the bed to the end and would never lie on the bed. When she ate, she would definitely eat on the dining table and not lying on the bed. When she ate, she would definitely use soaked instant noodles and would never eat dry instant noodles. In short, Lu Shihua liked and would definitely abide by these conventional rules. Unless there was an external force that forced her, she would never break this rule. Therefore, Gu Xianyuan was very sure that Lu Shihua must have encountered a situation where she had no choice but to break her usual rules to eat dry instant noodles. Right? It was also because of this character of Lu Shihua that Gu Xianyuan was sure that these instant noodles were eaten by Lu Shihua. Because these instant noodles residues appeared about a meter away from the traces of a tent, it was obvious that at that time, Lu Shihua sat at the entrance of her own tent and gnawed on these instant noodles. At the same time, a lot of food residues appeared in the traces of another tent, which meant that at that time, someone was sitting inside the tent and eating. This was something that Lu Shihua would never do. Lu Shihua would never eat inside the tent, because according to her usual principles, the tent was a place to sleep and not a place to eat. Going back to the question just now, what kind of situation happened that forced Lu Shihua to break her usual rules? But what about the instant noodles that she had never eaten dry? Could it be? A light flashed in Gu Xuanyuan's eyes. She once again searched through all the food residues, and shockingly found that all the food residues were cooked food. They were food that had already been cooked and could be eaten directly. There was nothing that needed to be cooked before being used. What did this mean? This meant that a very key problem was that Lu Shihua and the others had lost the ability to cook, or rather, the ability to boil water. Gu Xianyuan found a lot of traces of flames in the ruins before, which meant that Lu Shihua and the others did not lack the ability to start fire. Then there was only one reason left. Lu Shihua and the others had lost water, and there was no edible water. This forced Lu Shihua and the others to eat some directly edible cooked food, forcing Lu Shihua to eat only instant noodles. This was a very surprising fact to Gu Xianyuan. For a sword-bearer with a dimensional pocket, losing water was a very inconceivable thing. The huge space in the dimensional pocket could allow them to store more than a year's worth of edible water. Even if they wanted to take a bath, the stored water would be enough for them to bathe every day for a month. At this time, it was less than a week since Lu Shihua and the others left Yuzhong City. How could the water in their dimensional pocket disappear now? The dimensional pocket was the safest place in the world. Even if there was a force 12 gale outside, the water in the dimensional pocket would not be lost. Even if they were besieged by Yuan Ko, the water in the dimensional pocket would not be lost. Unless Lu Shihua and the others were stupid and took out all the water in the dimensional pocket to pour out, Gu Xianyuan could not think of any reason for Lu Shihua and the others to lose all their water. Unless there is a reason. Gu Xianyuan suddenly had an extremely bad thought in her heart. That is, Lu Shihua and the others not only lost their water, but also their dimensional pocket. Where is the nearest water source nearby? Without saying anything, Gu Xianyuan immediately took out a map from her dimensional pocket and began to search for all the places near Lanzhou City that could provide water. Before recovering Gahan's body, Gu Xianyuan did not dare to go to the personal terminal management office to repair her personal terminal, because this meant that the fact that Gu Xianyuan and Guhan were the same person would be exposed. Therefore, Gu Xianyuan did not have a personal terminal on her, and could not use the convenient map system of the personal terminal. She could only use these old-fashioned maps. Found it! Gu Xianyuan quickly confirmed the location of the nearest water source to Lanzhou City. If Gu Xuanyuan's estimation was not wrong, then Lu Shihua and the rest who had lost their water source would definitely come to this place and store enough water for them to use. Chapter 1147. 1,000 years ago, Guilin City had an inexhaustible source of water. That was the Yellow River, the mother river of Yanhuang. Guilin City was built on the Yellow River. However, with the changes of the times and the continuous advance of desertification, the Yellow River had changed its course 20 to 30 times. The nearest channel of the Yellow River was 300 kilometers away from Guilin City. Since Hua Tsubing built a stronghold 3,000 years ago, Guilin City had been inextricably linked to the Yellow River. 3,000 years later, it had completely lost contact with the Yellow River. It had to be said that this was a very ironic thing. After the large-scale desertification and the loss of irrigation from the Yellow River, the water sources around Guilin City became extremely scarce. The map in Gu Xuanyuan's hands was drawn 10 years ago. According to the information from 10 years ago, there were 24 large and small water sources within 200 kilometers of Guilin City. These were the traditional oases. However, the desert was ever-changing. There had never been an oasis that had existed for more than 50 years. Therefore, this map drawn 10 years ago might not be accurate. Among the 24 oases, it was estimated that at least 7 or 8 oases had disappeared and were replaced by new oases. Therefore, Gu Xianyuan was not sure that the oasis she was heading to next was still at the location shown on the map. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that Gu Xianyuan did not know about the changes in these oases. Lu Shihua and the others also did not know about the changes in these oases. Therefore, they would definitely do the same as Gu Xianyuan and follow the path closest to the oases. The oasis closest to Gulan City was named Bank Oasis. The reason for this name was because this oasis used to be the ruins of a China Credit Union 24-hour self-help bank by the Yellow River. Later on, this place gradually became an oasis. Therefore, it was simply and crudely named Bank Oasis by sword bearers who passed by. When Gu Xianyuan arrived at this Bank Oasis, she found that it was just as she had feared. This oasis had lost its greenery and water source. It had once again become a desert. Only a few withered old trees seemed to be crying to passers-by about how beautiful this place used to be. There is food residue here. However, Gu Xianyuan was not completely oblivious. She found some food residue near an old tree. Obviously, someone had eaten a meal here while leaning against the old tree. Without a doubt, the two people eating were Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit. This once again aroused Gu Xianyuan's deep suspicions and worries. This bank oasis was roughly 30 kilometers away from Lu Shihua and the rest campsite. According to common sense, after Lu Shihua and the others finished their breakfast, they set off from the ruins early in the morning. If they had driven a maglev flying car here, it would have taken them less than half an hour to travel the 30 kilometers. When they found out that the bank oasis had disappeared, they would inevitably look for the next possible oasis. In any case, they would not waste 3 to 4 hours in this bank oasis. They would wait until it was lunchtime to have lunch here. There was only one reason for this, and that was that Lu Shihua and the others had lost their maglev flying car and could only rely on their own feet to reach the bank oasis. Looking at it this way, 30 kilometers was exactly a 3 to 4 hour journey for the sword bearers, and it would be lunchtime when they arrived at the bank oasis. This situation even more clearly confirmed Gu Xianyuan's previous guess. Lu Shihua and the others had lost their dimensional pockets, and, at the same time, they had also lost the maglev flying car stored in the dimensional pocket. It's only been 2 to 3 days since they ate here. If Lu Shihua and the others lost their maglev flying car, they definitely won't be able to travel too far and can only move between the nearby oases. It stood to reason that after understanding this, Gu Xianyuan should be very happy. This meant that Gu Xianyuan only needed to explore all the surrounding oases to have a high chance of finding Lu Shihua and the others. However, there was a precondition. The precondition was that Lu Shihua and the others were lucky enough to not encounter a powerful meteor rank Yuan bandit. Otherwise, if they lost the hovercraft that could allow them to escape, it would be a huge question mark whether they could even survive around Lan Province. As a result, Gu Xianyuan's original plan was completely changed. Originally, Gu Xianyuan planned to chase along the road and find Lu Shihua and the others in Xinjiang. But now this plan had completely changed. Gu Xianyuan needed to carry out a large-scale search around Lanzhou. Things in this world were really unpredictable. Thinking of this, Gu Xianyuan once again sped up her pace and quickly headed to other oases, wanting to find traces of Lu Shihua and the others. However, the heavens seemed to intentionally increase the difficulty of Gu Xianyuan's mission. Gu Xianyuan searched for a total of 10 oases along the way, but these 10 oases had all dried up and turned back into deserts. Gu Xianyuan's search was also fruitless. Finally, when Gu Xianyuan found the 11th oasis, a touch of green finally appeared in front of Gu Xianyuan. This oasis did not dry up like the previous 10 oases. It still maintained its original appearance. There was a small pool of water with an area of about 1 hectare, and there were some trees growing nearby. It was a rare piece of green in the desert. Life detector, activate. Gu Xianyuan did not say anything and immediately took out a life detector from her dimensional pocket. This was a life detector that Gu Xianyuan had specially asked Sword Immortal Ling Su for in order to find the location of Lu Shihua and the others. All traces of life within its detection range could be detected by this life detector. It was a pity that this detection range was still a little too short. According to the range of life within a diameter of 10 kilometers, there would be no response beyond this range. If this detection range could be 100 kilometers, then Gu Xuanyuan's work would probably be much easier. She would only need to quickly make a few rounds around Liao City, and she would be able to find Lu Shihua and the others. What Gu Xuanyuan did not expect was that the moment she took out the life detector, a pleasant surprise occurred. The life detector began to emit a low and urgent beeping sound. This meant that the life detector had already found a living life nearby. However, this life signal was very weak, and there was the threat of death at any time. Could it be Lu Shihua and the others? Gu Xuanyuan did not say anything and directly sprinted in the direction indicated by the life detector. In the end, she discovered a person lying face down on the shore of the pool. Most of his body was submerged in the pool, and only his head was exposed. It's not Lu Shihua. After seeing the head clearly, Gu Xuanyuan sank into disappointment. This person had short hair. Whether it was Lu Shihua or Mu Shui's sword spirit, they both had long hair. If she was not mistaken, this person was not Lu Shihua. Although she was very disappointed, Gu Xuanyuan still sprinted towards this person and prepared to save him from the water. After all, this was a human life. Gu Xuanyuan could not just leave him in the lurch. It's actually him. She had to admit that fate was truly full of surprises. When Gu Xuanyuan pulled this person out of the water and flipped him over, she was shocked to find that this person was actually a familiar face. He was the only descendant of Zhetian Jindi who fought with her in Chanyang Mountain, the last descendant of the Yi clan, Yi Wenjun. How could it be him? Gu Xuanyuan did not expect to meet Yi Wenjun here at all. More than 3 years ago, after Yi Wenjun provided Gahan with the evidence that allowed Gahan to turn the tables, Gahan did not have much contact with Yi Wenjun other than having a meal with him. This was because not long after that, Gahan went to Yanjing City to participate in the 8th Academy Assembly, then went straight to Shanhai Pass. He stayed in Shanhai Pass for 3 years and did not see Yi Wenjun in Yuzhong City. If she had not suddenly seen Yi Wenjun, Gu Xuanyuan would have almost forgotten about this person. I don't know why he's unconscious. Gu Xuanyuan placed Yi Wenjun into the medical pod. The medical pod activated its automatic examination program, and after a series of scans, the examination report was displayed on the screen. The patient's body is very healthy, but because he has not eaten for a long time, his vital signs are weak. He only needs to inject a certain amount of glucose to alleviate the symptoms. However, there's a magical energy that belongs to Yuan Ko in the patient's brain, suppressing his central nervous system, so he is in a coma. The medical pod does not have the ability to treat this, and only by removing the magical energy in the patient's brain can the patient wake up. As expected, he became like this because he was attacked by Yuan Ko. The medical pod's diagnosis was very clear. He had fallen into a coma after being attacked by Yuan Ko's magic. This was a problem that the medical pod could not solve, and Gu Xuanyuan could only find a way to remove the magical energy in Yi Wenjun's brain to wake him up. But here came the problem. Ordinary sword maidens did not have the ability to remove magical energy, and only a few Confucian or martial sword maidens who had the ability to purify could use their own skills to treat Yi Wenjun. Obviously, Gu Xuanyuan did not have such a sword maiden. Forget it. I'll put him in the hovercraft first, and we'll talk about it after we find Lu Shihua and the others. Just as Gu Xuanyuan was about to temporarily give up on treating Yi Wenjun, a familiar voice rang in Gu Xuanyuan's ear. I say, Gahan, why are you so stupid? There's a ready-made sword maiden here, and you actually don't have the ability to remove any magical energy? This was the Xuanyuan sword's voice, and the sword empress began to cry out in surprise again. Lady Xuanyuan sword, you mean to say that you have a way to treat Yi Wenjun? Gu Xuanyuan said with some surprise. It's not that I have a way, it's the immortal slaying sword in your hand, the Xuanyuan sword said proudly. Your immortal slaying sword is a connate treasure that can even kill deities. You only need to put a bit of immortal slaying sword chi into his nostrils, and all magical energy will immediately disperse. The moment they touch the immortal slaying sword chi, they will melt like snow. Who asked the difference in innate levels to be so great? Hearing the Xianyuan sword's words, Gu Xianyuan placed the tip of the immortal slaying sword at Yi Wenjun's nostrils, and then slightly stimulated a bit of sword chi that resembled green smoke into Yi Wenjun's brain. Not long later, just as a Xianyuan sword said, Yi Wenjun's eyelids moved, and he slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 1148. You are. Yi Wenjun opened her eyes and found that a beautiful woman had appeared in front of her. Although it was the first time they met, Yi Wenjun had a vague feeling that he seemed to have met this beauty somewhere before. I'm Gu Xianyuan. Gu Xianyuan pulled Yi Wenjun out of the medical pod, then narrowed her eyes and said, I know you. You're Yi Wenjun, my brother's friend. I'm your brother's friend? Yi Wenjun was stunned for a moment, then thought of Gu Xuanyuan's rare surname and this familiar face, and immediately reacted. You must be Lord Guhan's sister. You're not that stupid. Gu Xianyuan stood up. Tell me, why did you faint in the pool? It was a Yuan bandit, a white-robed Yuan bandit. Yi Wenjun's face suddenly revealed an expression of incomparable terror. Me, Pavilion Master Lu Shihua, and Sword Spirit Mu Shui were attacked by a white-robed Yuan bandit. Mu Shui's Sword Spirit risked her life to block that white Yuan Ko, and I ran in a panic. I don't know how long I ran for, but I ran into a pool, and when I was stimulated by the cold water, I fainted. Yi Wenjun panted heavily as she spoke, as if she was still immersed in endless fear. What did you say? You met Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's Sword Spirit. Gu Xianyuan never expected that she would get such an important clue from Yi Wenjun. Yes, we were looking for a water source together, and when we finally found one, we met with such a thing. Yi Wenjun said in a low voice. Slow down a little. What happened? How did you meet Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's Sword Spirit? Gu Xianyuan tried her best to speak calmly. It's like this. Yi Wenjun slowly told her story. Ever since Yi Wenjun helped Gahan 3 years ago, she felt that she was too weak to revive the Yi family. So she decided to go out and train herself, using bloody battles to make herself stronger. As such, Yi Wenjun had been with the Swordbearers for the past 3 years, completing all sorts of missions and killing all sorts of Yuan Ko. His strength had indeed increased, and he was now a sword-rank swordbearer. 2 months ago, Yi Wenjun had joined a team of 20 swordbearers. Their mission was to explore a dimensional crystal mine. This mine was discovered by a team of swordbearers a year ago. It was said that the mine was very rich, more than 10 times richer than the mine in the Plum Ridge mountain range. It was the richest mine that humans had ever discovered, and it was very useful to humans. However, the team that had discovered the mine was too small in number, and their strength was also very weak. They also did not have any special equipment, so they could not fully explore the mine. Therefore, they could only return to Yuzhong City immediately and ask Yuzhong City to organize a strong team to explore the mine. This exploration team was led by 2 spirit sword-level swordbearers, and the rest were all famed sword-level swordbearers. It could be said that this was one of the strongest swordbearer teams that Yuzhong City could send out. According to the coordinates left by the team that had first discovered the mine, it was confirmed that the mine should be at the location of the Lujiaxia Reservoir before the Great Apocalypse. After some exploration and fighting, the team finally arrived at the Lujiaxia Reservoir. As expected, they found an extremely rich mine. Not only was it 10 times richer than the Plum Ridge mountain range, but it was also 5 times bigger than the Plum Ridge mountain range. The two multiplied to a difference of 50 times, which was enough for Yuzhong City to consume for 10,000 years. After confirming the location and content of the mine, the team prepared to return to Yuzhong City. However, Yi Wenjun and the other 4 famed sword-level swordbearers left the team and stayed behind. They felt that it would be a waste to rush back to the ancient Gansu province after going through so much trouble. It would be better to stay and explore and broaden their horizons. As a result, Yi Wenjun and the four famed sword-level friends wandered around the area for 2 months. When they felt that their adventure was almost over and were ready to return to Yuzhong City, they met the white-clothed Yuan Ko. Yi Wenjun and the others fought with the white-clothed Yuan Ko, but they found that they were no match for him. The four famed sword-level sword-bearers all died at the hands of the white-clothed Yuan Ko. Yi Wenjun's sword mistress was also broken. She no longer had the ability to fight with the white-clothed Yuan Ko. Just as Yi Wenjun was about to close her eyes and wait for death, she coincidentally met the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua, who had come looking for water. The Mu Shui sword spirit did not hesitate to fight with the white-clothed swordsman. Although the Mu Shui sword spirit was 1 rank higher than the famed sword-level sword-bearers, her strength was still very weak in front of the white-clothed Yuan Ko. The Mu Shui sword spirit quickly fell into a disadvantageous position, and her personal shield was also in danger. At this critical moment, the Mu Shui sword spirit let Yi Wenjun and Lu Shihua escape separately, while she sacrificed herself to stall the white-clothed Yuan Ko. Yi Wenjun had long been scared out of her wits by the white-clothed Yuan Ko. She did not have the courage to resist and could only run for her life. In the end, she fainted in the pool. That means the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua are in a very dangerous situation right now. After listening to Yi Wenjun's narration, Gu Xianyuan clenched his fists and immediately took out his own super hovercraft. Without any explanation, he pulled Yi Wenjun into the car, and under Yi Wenjun's command, they sped towards the location of the battle. Actually, the location of the battle wasn't too far away. It was only about 20 kilometers away from this oasis. After all, Yi Wenjun had run all the way here, and his pair of legs could not run that far. Only 10 minutes later, Gu Xianyuan arrived at the location of the battle. There was indeed an intense battle taking place here. Countless crisscrossing sword scars had appeared on the flat desert. The shortest of these sword scars was 10 meters long and 1 meter deep, while the longest was more than 500 meters long and 10 meters deep. Many of the sand in the sword scars had already become charred black. Some of the sand had even turned into glass, becoming the most primitive form of glass. From this, it could be seen how intense the battle had been. The one fighting here is most likely a peerless swordsman. Seeing these wanton crisscrossing sword scars, Gu Xuanyuan's mind couldn't help but think of scenes of intense battles. The core of these scenes was the image of a person wielding a long sword, constantly slashing out powerful sword chi. Miss Gu Xianyuan, let's split up and search. Let's see if we can find any clues about the Mu Shui sword spirit. Yi Wenjun suggested to Gu Xianyuan. All right, Gu Xianyuan nodded. The two of them went in 2 different directions to search the entire battlefield. In the end, not long after, Yi Wenjun found an extremely important clue at the edge of the battlefield. Miss Gu Xianyuan, look, this is the sword lady of Lord Mu Shui sword spirit. Yi Wenjun's face was filled with grief as she dragged some incomplete fragments in her hands. These were fragments left behind after a sword was broken. It would be very difficult for a normal person to recognize the original appearance of this sword from these fragments. But Gu Xianyuan, who was familiar with every spirit sword greatsword lady, immediately recognized that these fragments came from a spirit sword greatsword lady called the Black Tortoise Sword. This was because it was said that this sword was forged from the turtle shell of one of the 4 sacred beasts, the Black Tortoise of the North. Speaking of which, Gu Xianyuan wasn't unfamiliar with the Black Tortoise. When Gu Xianyuan was the Tying Star garrison, the Black Tortoise garrison was an extremely important garrison area under Tying Star garrison. At the same time, Gu Xianyuan was very clear that Mu Shui sword spirit's spirit sword lady was this Black Tortoise sword. Luckily, Mu Shui sword spirit's spirit sword lady was man-made. Otherwise, if the real Black Tortoise sword was broken here, then Yuzhong City's loss would be too great. Looks like Mu Shui sword spirit really did have a great battle here. Gu Xianyuan looked at the remains of the Black Tortoise sword and sighed in her heart. Although Mu Shui sword spirit's standpoint was different from hers, and she had also done many things that made her extremely disgusted. But after all, They were both sword bearers of Yuzhong City, so Gu Xianyuan couldn't help but feel a little sad in her heart. After putting the broken black tortoise sword into the dimensional pocket, Gu Xianyuan and Yi Wenjun quickly found some other relics. These were all Mu Shui sword spirits and Lu Shihua's belongings. There was also Yi Wenjun's own belongings. Yi Wenjun found the remains of her famous grade sword lady's broken sword and hugged the remains as she cried. After all, for every sword bearer, the sword lady was their lifeblood. The sword maiden was their lifeblood. Now that their lifeblood was gone, every sword wielder would be grief-stricken. What's a man crying for? Right now, the most important thing is to find that Lu Shihua and the others. I discovered that although there are many of their relics nearby, I still haven't found their corpses, not even a piece of minced meat. I suspect that Lu Shihua and the others didn't die, but were captured by Yuan Ko. Right now, our top priority is to find them. But in this vast desert, besides these unconcealable sword marks, there aren't any other footprints. Where are we going to find traces of Pavilion Master Lu Shihua and the others? Yi Wenjun knelt on the ground and said in a daze, "Wait for him to come find me." Gu Xianyuan said something that made Yi Wenjun feel incomparably flabbergasted. What was this? Why would he, Gu Xianyuan, let that white-robed Yuan Ko come find him? Just when Yi Wenjun was feeling puzzled, Gu Xianyuan suddenly slowly floated up, facing the sun high up in the sky. He calmed his mind for a moment. Then suddenly a sword chi slashed out from the execution immortal sword in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. In the next second, Yi Wenjun's pupils constricted, because the target of Gu Xuanyuan's sword chi wasn't anything else but the sun suspended in the sky. The moment the sword chi slashed out, the sun in Yi Wenjun's eyes actually broke into two halves. Yes, that's right, the sun in the sky was cut into two halves by Gu Xuanyuan's sword chi. Chapter 1149. In fact, it was not just Yi Wenjun. The entire Yin Huang territory, including Yinjing City and Yuzhong City, saw the sun suddenly split in half. But this magical scene was fleeting. When these witnesses rubbed their eyes to get a clearer look, the sun returned to its original state, and there was no other abnormality. So 99% of the humans who saw this scene thought they were seeing things and did not take it to heart. As for the remaining 1% of humans who firmly believed that they saw the sun split in half, their words were just gossip and did not attract anyone's attention. The whole thing was not shocking in reality or on the internet, and no one discussed it. But this was only for ordinary people. Among the top sword bearers and Yuan Ko, there were also many powerful beings who saw this magical scene. They were not like ordinary humans who thought that there was something wrong with their eyes. They knew clearly that at that moment, the sun was indeed split in half. In this regard, all of the powerful beings felt a bit of terror in their hearts. To be able to split the sun with a single sword strike, how terrifying must one's strength be to achieve such a feat? Could it be that another terrifying sword wielder or Yuan Ko had been born in this world? Miss Gu Xianyuan, did you really split the sun just now? When everything calmed down, Yi Wenjun walked to Gu Xuanyuan's side, trembling, and asked with a tone of horror. He suddenly realized that he did not understand this sister of Lord Gahan. This sister seemed to be more powerful and terrifying than Gahan. How was that possible? If I can split the sun with a sword, then there will be no Yuan Ko left alive on this earth. Gu Xianyuan shook her head. This is just a little trick. Really? A little trick like light and shadow magic? Yi Wenjun suddenly remembered that she had seen some ordinary people perform very magical magic on TV, such as a coin falling under the table through a cup or a person being cut in half, but the two bodies were still alive and kicking, and so on. Could it be that what Gu Xianyuan showed just now was also a kind of magic, using some changes in light and shadow to create the illusion of the sun being split in half? Light and shadow? Gu Xianyuan pondered over these two words, nodded, and said, "More or less. In a way, it's the same." I see. Yi Wenjun felt that her broken common sense had recovered quite a bit. As long as everything was still within the scope of her common-sense understanding, it was fine. However, Yi Wenjun still could not understand why Gu Xianyuan would do this. Did she think that by splitting the sun, she would be able to lure the white-clothed Yuan Ko to appear? Yi Wenjun felt that this was an impossible thing, but very quickly, Yi Wenjun was slapped in the face. After a while, a white figure gradually appeared at the edge of his vision. The figure grew larger and closer. Yi Wenjun was clearly 4 to 5 kilometers away from the edge of her field of vision, and the white-clothed figure was only walking at an ordinary pace. However, in just a short span of 20 to 30 seconds, the white-clothed figure had reached a distance of less than 200 meters from Yi Wenjun. His entire figure and appearance were clearly visible. It's him. It was him. He's that white-clothed Yuan Ko. Yi Wenjun let out a scream of horror. Then, he quickly hid behind Gu Xianyuan. His entire body was trembling. It seemed that he had developed a deep fear towards this white-clothed Yuan Ko. Stand up. Seeing Yi Wenjun become like this, Gu Xuanyuan's heart gave birth to some unhappiness. This was Yi Qing's only descendant. How could she be so unbearable? Seeing a Yuan Ko, and she was already this scared. How could she continue the bloodline of Zhetian Jiandi in the future? Gu Xianyuan did not waste any words. She directly slapped Yi Wenjun's face. After letting out a crisp and sweet sound, she expressionlessly asked Yi Wenjun, "Does it hurt?" "It hurts." Yi Wenjun touched his own face. He looked at Gu Xianyuan in confusion. "Is there still fear in your heart?" Gu Xianyuan asked again. "It seems to be a bit lighter." Yi Wenjun had not finished speaking when Gu Xianyuan slapped Yi Wenjun's face again. This time, she used more force than before. The sound was also louder. The pain was also more severe. The fear in Yi Wenjun's heart was also replaced by this severe pain. "Stand properly. Don't lose the face of Zhetian Jiandi," Gu Xianyuan lightly said. Yi Wenjun finally understood the reason why Gu Xianyuan slapped him. It turned out that Gu Xianyuan planned to use pain and humiliation to replace the fear in Yi Wenjun's heart. Although this method was violent and painful, one had to admit that it was a very effective method. At least, Yi Wenjun was no longer trembling in fear. Desolate wind and sand for thousands of miles. Half of the smoke and dust rolled up the round sun. This white-clothed Yuan Ko was also interesting. The moment he saw Gu Xianyuan, he first chanted a poem. Then he said with a warm smile, "In this sandstorm, I did not expect to see such a beautiful woman. Bai is really lucky. Is it him?" Gu Xianyuan ignored this white-clothed Yuan Ko's teasing. Instead, she turned her head and asked Yi Wenjun behind her. "It's him." Yi Wenjun nodded her head. "It's him. I would recognize him even if he turned into ashes." Gu Xianyuan swept a few glances at this white-clothed Yuan Ko. She discovered that the other party was around 30 or 40 years old. From the outline of his face, it could be seen that this white-clothed Yuan Ko must have been an extremely handsome person when he was young. But at the age of 40, his face was already covered with wrinkles left behind by time. It was as if they were carved by a knife. To be able to have wrinkles like this at the age of 40, he must have lived an extraordinary life. His life must have been full of ups and downs. This could also be seen from his clothes. This white-clothed Yuan Ko was called white-clothed Yuan Ko. Naturally, he wore white clothes. Moreover, it was absolutely white. Even the belt around his waist was white. Judging from the style of the clothes, it was definitely not the overly westernized and casual clothes of the Celestial Dynasty. Instead, it was similar to the clothes of the Middle Ages. A long white robe covered her entire body from head to toe. The collar, cuffs, and edges of the robe were pasted to the sides. The front and back of the robe were straight, and the lower edges of the front and back lapels were connected horizontally with a piece of cloth. The waist was tightly fastened with a leather belt, and the sleeves were straight. The entire robe was tightly attached to the body, completely revealing the slender and perfect figure of the person. This seems to be the clothes of the Tang dynasty. Gu Xianyuan recalled an ancient painting of the Tang dynasty that she had seen unearthed from a ruin. The people in the ancient painting were dressed exactly the same as the Yuan Ko in front of her. Obviously, this Yuan Ko should be a human from the Tang dynasty. For a person from the Tang dynasty in the Middle Ages, there were two reasons why a person liked to wear white clothes. First, he was born with a preference for white and liked to wear white clothes. Second, this person was extremely poor, so poor that he could only wear white clothes. This was because in the Middle Ages, pigments were very expensive. The value of a gram of pigments was often comparable to the value of a gram of gold. A bolt of white cloth was not worth much. However, once it was dyed with different colors and patterns, this bolt of cloth would become very valuable. Therefore, brightly colored clothes were clothes that only the rich could afford to wear. Ordinary people could only wear clothes made of white or gray cloth. This was because these clothes did not need to be dyed and were the cheapest. In addition to the color, it could be seen that this Yuan Ko was very poor in the other world. There was one more thing that could be proved. That was, his whole set of clothes was very simple. Other than the belt on his waist, there were no other ornaments. While this set of clothes completely revealed the figure of this Yuan Ko, it also showed that there was nothing else inside this set of clothes. This Yuan Ko only had this set of clothes on his entire body. It could be said that this white-clothed Yuan Ko's entire image was very destitute. It was hard to believe that such a destitute person could actually be the powerful Yuan Ko who could defeat a spirit sword level sword holder. Miss is staring at Bai like this. Do you want Bai to compose a poem for Miss to praise your beauty? This white-clothed Yuan Ko revealed a somewhat regretful expression. It's a pity that Bai really doesn't have the mood to recite a poem today. Miss, please forgive me. Let me ask you, what did I take our friend? Gu Xianyuan put away her curiosity towards this white-clothed Yuan Ko. The execution immortal sword in her hand was directly pointed at the other party's neck, preparing to force Lu Shihua and the others to tell her the way down. Good sword. Unexpectedly, this white-clothed Yuan Ko was completely not intimidated by the sword in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. Instead, he stretched out his right hand, wanting to grab the execution immortal sword in front of him and carefully study and admire it. Humph! How could Gu Xianyuan let this white-clothed Yuan Ko have his way? The execution immortal sword in her hand slightly trembled. It turned into an afterimage and directly slashed towards the white-clothed Yuan Ko's throat. Seeing Gu Xuanyuan's swordplay, the white-clothed Yuan Ko's expression was first joyful. However, this joyful expression quickly turned into a shocked expression. Both of his hands reached out, and his 10 fingers flicked the execution immortal sword's blade more than a dozen times. Gu Xianyuan was stunned to find that the execution immortal sword was involuntarily turned back under the effect of a strange force. If it wasn't for Gu Xuanyuan's quick reaction and skillfully dispelling the force coming from the execution immortal sword, the execution immortal sword would have already flown out of her hand. Of course, because Gu Xuanyuan's hand had already fused with the execution immortal sword, Gu Xianyuan should have flown out along with the execution immortal sword. Good swordplay. This one is Jian Ansley Bai. May I ask for Mrs. Great Name? The white-clothed Yuan Ko cupped his fist and asked Gu Xianyuan. Chapter 1150. When the white-robed Yuan Ko announced his name, he looked at Gu Xianyuan with a face full of joy. He felt that as long as he announced his name, Gu Xianyuan would turn pale with fright. Then, she would kowtow and worship him, becoming his little fangirl. Unfortunately, after hearing Li Bai's name, Gu Xianyuan did not have any reaction. It was as if this name was just an ordinary name, no different from names like Wang Ergu, Li Jianguo, or Chen Yuan Chao. The bright moonlight in front of the bed, suspected to be frost on the ground. Suddenly, Li Bai recited a poem. Then, he stared at Gu Xuanyuan's expression, expecting her to reveal a look of sudden enlightenment, followed by an expression of shock. But to Li Bai's disappointment, Gu Xianyuan still did not have any reaction. It was as if this poem had never existed in Gu Xuanyuan's mind. The flying stream descends 3,000 feet, suspected to be the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Raising a cup to invite the bright moon, the shadow becomes 3 people. The peach blossom pond is 1,000 feet deep, not as deep as the love Wang Lun gave me. Leaving the White Emperor in the morning among the colorful clouds, 1,000 miles of Jiangling will be returned in a day. Pu'er will exchange for good wine. With you, we will share the sorrow of eternity. Li Bai recited dozens of ancient classic poems in one breath, hoping that one sentence would be able to stir Gu Xuanyuan's thoughts. But what made Li Bai feel despair was that these poems not only did not make Gu Xuanyuan have any reaction that Li Bai hoped for, but instead made her reveal an expression as if she was looking at an idiot. In fact, Gu Xuanyuan also felt that she had met an idiot Yuan Ko. Otherwise, why would this Yuan Ko recite poems by himself? Could it be that he was a poet in his previous life? Ha ha! Li Bai laughed dryly. At this moment, he confirmed that the other party had indeed never heard of his name. He awkwardly pretended to be heroic. It seems that I, Li Bai, have been thinking too much. I thought that in this future, my name, Li Bai, will be known by everyone. What a joke! What a joke! Ha 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 ha! Hearing Li Bai's words, Gu Xuanyuan finally understood that the other party might really be a poet. Just now, he recited so many poems in one breath just to let her recognize his identity. It was a pity that the other party didn't seem to know that something like the great cultural destruction had happened in the world, and all the ancient poems were incomplete. Even if 1 or 2 ancient poems were passed down, no one knew who the author of these ancient poems was. This also explained another fact. This Yuan Ko, named Li Bai, seemed to have just traveled to this world. He knew that this world was the future, but he didn't know the specific situation of this world. I have heard the name Li Bai. At this time, Yi Wenjun, who was hiding behind Gu Xuanyuan, suddenly spoke up. I once read about Li Bai's name in some of the diaries left behind by the ancestors. Oh, Yi Wenjun's words caused Gu Xuanyuan's eyes to light up. At the same time, Li Bai also revealed a curious expression. Tell me, what did Zhetian Jindi write in this diary? Let me think. The original words seem to be like this. Yi Wenjun thought for a while and began to recite. Today, I was drinking with an old friend. He said that he found a well-preserved, complete Tang Dynasty poem in the ruins. When he saw the poem left behind by Li Bai, he couldn't help but be fascinated. He wanted to drink and sing with Li Bai and ask him about life. I say, so what if you meet Li Bai? Won't you still have to pull out your sword, Maiden, and fight to the death with him? My old friend was rendered speechless by my words. After a while, he faintly said, but I don't want to fight with him. I only want to discuss poetry with him. I want to talk about the magnificent era of the Tang Dynasty. Seeing my old friend's displeasure, my heart is also very gloomy. Actually, I really want to meet Li Bai, but I have no interest in talking about poetry with him. I only want to spar with him in swordsmanship. I want to borrow this Sword Immortal's swordsmanship to see the gap between me and that person, because I will never be able to spar with him again in this lifetime. It was obvious that Yi Wenjun's mind was filled with restoring his Yi clan's glory. Otherwise, he wouldn't have memorized his ancestors' diary. This was something that only people who worship their ancestors to the extreme would do. However, as Yi Wenjun recited the diary, 2 people piqued Gu Xuanyuan's curiosity. One was an old friend who drank with Zhetian Jindi, and the other was the person that Zhetian Jindi talked about. Why did Zhetian Jindi feel that after fighting Li Bai, he would know the gap between him and that person? This was something that Gu Xuanyuan was very curious about. There are still people who remember me in this world. After listening to Yi Wenjun's recitation, Li Bai finally showed a somewhat gratified expression. However, Li Bai didn't have time to be gratified for long. He found that his neck was once again pressed against the tip of a sword. Li Bai looked at the sword and said helplessly, "Why do you have to be like this again? Why can't you talk to me properly, girl? Let's be like that old friend and talk about spring flowers and autumn moons and how great the Tang Dynasty is. If you want to talk about these things, that's fine. But first, tell me, where did you take my friends?" Gu Xuanyuan said coldly, Your friends are 2 women. One is around 50 years old, with a stern look on her face, and has 4 sword sheaths hanging on her waist. The other is a young girl, around 20 years old? Li Bai asked as he yawned. That's them. Gu Xianyuan nodded her head. Although Li Bai's description wasn't very accurate, it all matched up with Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit. For two women to appear in this place at this time and place, other than Mu Shui's sword spirit and Lu Shihua, there was no other possibility. Oh, then you don't need to look for them. Li Bai sighed. They're already dead. I buried them with my own hands. It's already been a few hours. Restrain your grief and accept fate. Although she had already guessed that Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives were already gone, hearing Li Bai say these words with her own ears, Gu Xianyuan still felt like a bolt from the blue had exploded in her mind. Gu Xianyuan had a feeling that Li Bai wasn't lying. What he said was the truth. No matter what sword wielders Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit were, with their bodies buried in the sand for a few hours, even an Emperor Sword-grade medical pod wouldn't be able to save them. Lu Shihua was already dead. Gu Xianyuan couldn't help but think of every memory she had with Lu Shihua. From when Lu Shihua had saved her from the ruins with Gu Xuanyuan's attitude, she had lived in Lu Shihua's house for a month. Lu Shihua had taken good care of her meticulously. Lu Shihua had followed her to learn the sword. In Yuzhong City's court, when she had handed over the position of Yuzhong City's Sword Tower Pavilion Master to her, and when she had gone to Shanghai Pass and waved goodbye to Lu Shihua. Who would have thought that this would be their farewell forever? Then you could die too. The Zhu Xian sword in Gu Xuanyuan's hand flashed. This battle with the poet immortal was unavoidable. Chapter 11:51. Why are we fighting? Li Bai revealed a puzzled expression. I have just arrived in this world. Moreover, I have no enmity with Miss, so why does Miss want to kill me? Less nonsense. Gu Xianyuan was not willing to listen to Li Bai's explanation anymore. The Zhu Xian sword in her hand suddenly shook out countless sword chi. Each of these sword chi could easily tear apart steel. Once hit by these sword chi, even if Li Bai was an immortal, he would still die here. Seeing this sky full of sword chi, Li Bai's pupils instantly shrank. He knew that this beautiful young lady was not joking with him. She really wanted to kill him. Flying sword, art floating clouds, vassals come west. Li Bai used one hand to pull out his waist. The belt that was tied around his waist was instantly pulled out by Li Bai. The entire belt in Li Bai's hand was crazily twitching like a live eel. Li Bai's belt was actually a sword that could be tied around his waist like a belt. At the moment when Gu Xuanyuan's sword chi attacked, this belt also released countless sword chi. It directly collided with Gu Xuanyuan's sword chi. An intense explosion sound erupted in the air. The entire world began to tremble violently. The yellow sand on the ground flew in all directions under the attack of the sword chi. In an instant, it filled the entire space. It was as if they had arrived in a huge haze where the visibility was less than a meter. Yi Wenjun stood in the same place. He looked around him in panic. As far as the eye could see, he could only see the yellow sand dancing in the air. The visibility had already dropped to less than a meter. At this moment, if Yi Wenjun stretched out his hand straight forward, he would not be able to see his palm clearly. This was a blank world, a world that could be called a yellow night, just like the dark night. However, although Yi Wenjun was unable to clearly see the situation in his surroundings, he could sense from the violent explosions ringing in his ears, as well as the increasingly dense yellow sand that wished to bury him. Gu Xianyuan and Li Bai were currently engaged in an incomparably intense battle. Furthermore, this battle was becoming more and more intense. Perhaps both sides had already reached the point where they were fighting to the death. In this pitch-black yellow night, Yi Wenjun had lost the ability to control time and space. He did not know how much time had passed. He also did not know if he had moved or not. Luckily, I have a personal terminal. Just as Yi Wenjun was about to use his personal terminal to determine the time, he was horrified to find that the time function of his personal terminal was actually messed up. The number representing the time jumped thousands of times per second. Obviously, the personal terminal's timekeeping function was disrupted by some force. Could it be that their swordsmanship has reached a level where they can interfere with time and space. Wen-jun looked in the direction of the explosion in horror. This discovery had already exceeded Wen-jun's imagination. What kind of swordsmanship could be so powerful? Helpless, Wen-jun could only completely give up on probing into time and helplessly wait for the battle to end. As far as Wen-jun knew, some battles between top experts were very short as a few seconds to decide the winner. Some of them were so long that they wouldn't end even after 100 years. After about 20 to 30 math lessons, Wen-jun suddenly realized that the intense explosion had disappeared without a trace. Then, the yellow sand that filled the sky began to slowly disperse. Even the chaotic time on his personal terminal had returned to normal. However, this time was still at the moment when the battle began. Wen-jun knew that it should be over by now. The yellow night was about to disperse. He was ready to wait for the final victor to be born and see if it was Li Bai or Gu Xianyuan who had survived. "How are you? I didn't hurt you, did I?" Hearing the familiar and beautiful voice in his ear, Wen-jun breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that the final victor had been born. Gu Xianyuan had won this earth-shattering battle. "Miss Xianyuan, don't worry. I'm not hurt. Where are you? Do you need me to help you?" "Give me the med bay." Gu Xianyuan stopped mid-sentence. Wen-jun felt a heavy body pressing down on him. "Miss Xianyuan, Miss Xianyuan." Wen-jun struggled to hold Gu Xianyuan's body in his arms. As a result, he found that Gu Xianyuan's current condition was quite bad. Her body was covered with all kinds of scars. Blood flowed out of Gu Xianyuan's body quickly. Soon, Gu Xianyuan and Wen-jun's body were all dyed bright red. It seemed that although Gu Xianyuan had won the battle with Li Bai, Gu Xianyuan had also suffered great damage from Li Bai. Judging from the current state, if it was delayed for a while, Gu Xianyuan was likely to die from exhaustion of her blood. Therefore, just like what Gu Xianyuan said before she fainted, Wen-jun must immediately take out his med bay and put Gu Xianyuan in for treatment. However, Wen-jun seemed to have forgotten about this point and was just constantly shaking Gu Xianyuan's body, slapping Gu Xianyuan's face, wanted to wake Gu Xianyuan up from his unconscious state. However, this was obviously an impossible thing. Wen-jun's actions not only did not wake Gu Xianyuan up, but because of the violent shaking, Gu Xianyuan's wounds were unable to heal by themselves. More blood was shaken out by Wen-jun during the shaking process. As Gu Xianyuan lost more blood, Gu Xianyuan's face became pale, her skin became cold, and her breathing became extremely weak. Even if Gu Xianyuan had completely stopped breathing, Wen-jun still kept shaking until she could no longer shake out a single drop of blood. Only then did Wen-jun stop her movements. She panted crazily and screamed as if she had seen a ghost. She threw Gu Xianyuan's body away, letting it roll a few times in the desert. Those bloody wounds were instantly covered with hot yellow sand, and her whole body was like a little yellow man. Wah! Seeing this scene, Wen-jun raised both of her hands to the sky. She wanted to tear her vocal cords apart. After letting out a crazy cry, she fell to the ground powerlessly and began to cry loudly. "Wah! I'm a beast. I'm a bastard, wah." Wen-jun was like a child who had done something wrong, crying helplessly. However, she was also like a child who had done something wrong. Her crying was mixed with some self-comforting, perfunctory words, but there was not much remorse to speak of. "You've succeeded. What are you crying for? Crocodile tears?" Behind Wen-jun, a faint voice that sounded like the voice of a big boss behind the scenes suddenly rang out. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Wen-jun did not know what to say. She could only use an even more miserable cry to cover up her complicated feelings. "Let's go. There is no longer any value in staying here." This voice appeared in front of Wen-jun again. Wen-jun raised her head and saw a completely black sword floating in front of her. However, Wen-jun did not have any surprised expression. It was obvious that Wen-jun had long been accustomed to the existence of this sword. And this sword seemed to be hiding behind Wen-jun, the culprit who had suddenly planned everything. "Why? Why do you want me to do such a thing? Yi Wen-jun suddenly raised her head and questioned Black Sword with a strange, torn expression. Do you know? She is my benefactor's biological sister. Without my benefactor, I would have died in Yuzhong City. But now you want me to kill my benefactor's biological sister. This biological sister wanted to protect me before she died and asked if I was injured. What did you make me do? How strange. Didn't you do it yourself? Black Sword began to circle Yi Wen-jun's body and said leisurely, Don't forget, I've never controlled your body. Everything you do is determined by your own will. I got what I wanted, and you'll also get what you want. What's wrong with that? Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Seeing that Yi Wen-jun could only use the words nonsense to refute him, even though Black Sword did not have a face, it seemed to have a mocking expression on its face. Humans were like this. They made choices based on their own desires, but in the end, they had to push the blame onto others. Black Sword knew this very well. When Yi Wen-jun fell silent again, Black Sword asked slowly, Have you had enough? Yes. Yi Wen-jun nodded. If it's enough, then let's go. We can't waste too much time here. You still have to return to Yuzhong City. Black Sword said, Miss Xianyuan, her body, don't we need to bury it? Yi Wen-jun asked. He seemed to have retained the last bit of his conscience and did not want Gu Xuanyuan's body to be exposed in the wilderness. The world will bury her, Black Sword said in a hoarse and philosophical voice, leaving Yi Wen-jun speechless. She could only wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes and stand up unsteadily. She was ready to leave with Black Sword. Bright moonlight before my bed. Li Bai sleeps soundly. Just as Yi Wen-jun and Black Sword were about to leave, a melodious song came from somewhere. Yi Wen-jun panicked. She felt as if something was tugging at her feet. When he looked down, he saw a belt around his ankle. Save me! Yi Wen-jun let out a scream. The Black Sword slashed at the belt, wanting to cut it to pieces. However, when Yi Wen-jun's sword struck the belt, it created sparks. Drunk, with a slight tug on the belt, Yi Wen-jun could no longer control his center of gravity. He instantly fell to the ground. At the same time, two large hands that had experienced the vicissitudes of time suddenly reached out from under the desert. Then, a person slowly crawled out of the desert. Upon closer inspection, it was Li Bai, who should have died under Gu Xuanyuan's sword. Chapter 1152. You didn't die? Seeing Li Bai appear like a mummy, Yi Wen-jun's expression was one of extreme fear. Just a little trick, or else I would have already died in Lu Shan's hands. Li Bai retracted his hand, and the belt that was holding onto Yi Wen-jun returned to Li Bai's hand. Then, Li Bai solemnly tied it back to his waist and sang, The belt grows wider, and I regret. Because Li Bai had tied the belt back to his waist, Yi Wen-jun instinctively began to think about how to escape. But then, Yi Wen-jun thought that the reason why Li Bai had so easily retracted the belt was probably because Li Bai felt that even if he didn't use the soft sword in his hand, he could still easily deal with her. Thinking of this, Yi Wen-jun immediately gave up on the idea of escaping. What do you plan to do with me? Yi Wen-jun seemed to have calmed down and very calmly asked Li Bai. I don't know. Li Bai shook his head. I just arrived here, and I was inexplicably involved in a battle with such a strong person. Are there strong people like this everywhere in this world? That's not it. I'm afraid you've met the most abnormal of us all. Yi Wen-jun smiled helplessly. Then tell me, what's going on in this world? Why do you guys want to kill me as soon as you see me? I clearly didn't hurt any of you, okay? Li Bai also smiled bitterly. I'll have to start from where you guys came from 1,000 years ago. Yi Wen-jun spent a few minutes to roughly tell Li Bai about the Great Apocalypse. Later, Li Bai asked why the humans of today hadn't heard his poem. So Yi Wen-jun also confessed the story of the Great Apocalypse to Li Bai. While Yi Wen-jun was speaking, the black sword floated quietly beside Yi Wen-jun. The sword can actually transform into a girl's appearance. After listening to Yi Wen-jun's narration, Li Bai's face was full of disbelief. He touched his belt and said thoughtfully, Then can my green lotus sword also transform into the sword lady you speak of? I'm afraid not. Jun explained the rules of the Sword Lady to Li Bai. Only a treasure sword that was born in this world could transform into a Sword Lady. Is that young lady also a Sword Maiden? Li Bai speculated. This, of course. Jun instinctively wanted to deny Li Bai's guess, but his heart skipped a beat, and he changed his words. That Sword Maiden attacked me as soon as she saw me, and it's all because of you. You framed me, didn't you? After Li Bai understood the general situation of this world, he revealed the truth that Jun feared the most with a gloomy expression. Yes, it's me. Jun admitted it without hesitation. Tell me, how did you frame me? Why did you frame me? Li Bai asked the question that puzzled him the most. This was because Li Bai had been dumbfounded the entire time and had been passively involved in this conspiracy. Actually, I met Lord Li Bai yesterday. Jun hesitated for a while, but still decided to tell the truth. Otherwise, if she incurred Li Bai's wrath, she wouldn't be able to escape. Yesterday, I remember now. Li Bai nodded thoughtfully. That day I was practicing my swordsmanship nearby, and I met two girls who were fleeing, so I saved them. Now that I think about it, the person who chased after those two girls was probably you. That's me. Jun nodded. So after you saw my swordsmanship, you planned to use my sword to kill someone, and get me to help you get rid of that Sword Maiden? Li Bai asked again. Yes. Jun admitted it again. That's strange. That Sword Maiden's swordsmanship wasn't any weaker than mine. If I hadn't hidden in the sandpit and pretended to be dead, I'm afraid I would have been killed by that Sword Maiden. It didn't seem like you wanted to use my hand to kill that Sword Maiden, but more like you wanted to use that Sword Maiden to kill me. I didn't know. I didn't know that Gu Xianyuan was this powerful. I thought that with your strength, you would be able to kill her easily. Jun said with a bitter smile. That's not right. Li Bai thought for a moment, then said, Yesterday, Bai left this place. If it wasn't for the red sun being split by the sword Qi, Bai wouldn't have returned here. Bai has always been at ease. Even Bai doesn't know where Bai stays at night. How can you guarantee that you'll be able to find Bai with that Sword Maiden? Actually, someone has been following you, Lord Li Bai. It's just that Lord Li Bai doesn't know it. Jun said. Li Bai's eyes swept over Jun's body and finally stopped on the black sword. He said thoughtfully, the thing that's been following Bai is this black sword? Lord Li Bai is wise. Jun admitted again. How did this black sword follow Bai? Li Bai revealed a confused expression. It's not that Bai is boasting, but even if there was a fly following Bai would be able to easily detect it. How did such an obvious black sword follow Bai and escape Bai's detection? Because this black sword can enter the void. As soon as Jun's voice fell, a void door appeared next to the black sword. The black sword cut through the void door and disappeared without a trace. It really is magical. Li Bai jumped up in shock. Just a second ago, this black sword was in Li Bai's detection, but in the next second, it completely left Li Bai's detection. This is something that Li Bai has never encountered before. Lord Li Bai doesn't know about the void? Doesn't it have the ability to enter the void? Jun was also shocked. What is the void? It's the crack that appeared just now. Bai has always only learned some sword skills. Things like the void are things that ox-nosed Taoists like to study. Bai has never been interested in anything like that. I can't believe that this Li Bai is just a meteor realm Yuan Ko. This is unbelievable. A meteor realm Yuan Ko can cause a commotion that isn't any weaker than any immortal sword wielder. At this time, Jun realized that Li Bai was actually a meteor realm Yuan Ko who didn't have the ability to travel through the void. Of course, this couldn't be confirmed because there was some extremely special universe realm, an Ian realm Yuan Ko who also didn't have the ability to travel through the void. Okay, Bai has a general understanding of the situation, but there's one last question. According to what you said before, humans and the Sword Lady should be fighting together, and that Sword Lady protected you in every way possible. If she hadn't risked her injuries to block a few sword Qis attacking you, I'm afraid that the Sword Maiden would still be alive and well, and you would have been turned into a pile of minced meat long ago. When he asked this question, Li Bai's eyes were filled with deep contempt. I'm sorry, I don't want to answer this question. In the end, Yi Wenjun didn't know how to answer Li Bai's question, so she just chose to refuse. That's good too. Since you answer my questions, I can agree to one of your requests. Tell me, how do you want to die? Li Bai stood up and slightly clenched his hand. His palm was like a vacuum cleaner, sucking up countless grains of quicksand from the ground and gathering them in Li Bai's hand. The grains of sand quickly gathered together like a 3D printer, quickly forming the shape of a sword. Bai hates traitors the most. Killing you will dirty Bai's sword. So Bai will use this quicksand sword to end your despicable life. Li Bai's actions shocked Yi Wenjun. Because of the harmonious atmosphere just now, Yi Wenjun thought that she had dispelled Li Bai's hostility towards her. Li Bai thought that he would let her live because she answered so many questions for him. But in the end, it was all for naught. Li Bai still wanted to kill her. No, you can't kill me. We're on the same side, and we're on the same side. Yi Wenjun screamed. Interesting. Didn't you just say that Bai is a Yuan Ko from the 2D world? And you're a native human of this world? Are you and Bai natural enemies? Why are you on the same side now? Li Bai said as he approached Yi Wenjun step by step. Black sword, come out. Yi Wenjun shouted at the air beside her. Soon, a crack appeared in the void again, and the black sword that had disappeared in the void returned to normal. Look at this black sword. This is not an ordinary black sword. It is Ming Yuan Jiandi's token. I am Ming Yuan Jiandi's. Ming Yuan Jiandi, do you know? She's the most powerful Yuanko, just like you. I'm her collaborator. We're one. Yi Wenjun had no choice but to reveal her biggest secret. It turned out that Yi Wenjun was backed by Ming Yuan Jiandi, the biggest traitor in human history. I don't know any Ming Yuan Jiandi. Li Bai shook his head. No matter who you work for, you are a traitor. You could die now. Li Bai was unmoved. The sand sword in his hand reflected the light of the sun, as if announcing Yi Wenjun's death. No, I can't die. The shrouding heavens family hasn't been revived in my hands yet. How can I die in the hands of a Yuan Ko? Yi Wenjun grabbed the black sword and said, Ming Yuan Jiandi, save me. You promised me that you would use the giant void hand to take me away if I was in danger. My life wouldn't be in any danger. Hurry and save me. Save me. Unfortunately, no matter how much Yi Wenjun screamed and begged, the black sword did not respond. Traitor, looks like you've been betrayed too. Seeing this, Li Bai couldn't help but smile mockingly. This is a laughable life. I hope you can remember this life's lesson and be a good person in your next life. With that, Li Bai slashed down with the sand sword, aiming for Yi Wenjun's white neck. Chapter 1153. In the end, Yi Wenjun didn't die under Li Bai's sword because a sword blocked Li Bai's blade. However, this sword wasn't the Netheriris Sword Emperor's black sword, but Gu Xuanyuan's exterminating immortal sword. Li Bai raised his head and saw Gu Xianyuan, who was covered in sand, standing behind Yi Wenjun in a sorry state. She used the Zhu Xian sword in her hand to block his quicksand sword. What? Did I become a good person for nothing? Li Bai laughed at himself, then dispersed the quicksand sword. Since the victim stopped him from killing this beast, then why should he be a bad person who didn't know what was good for him? Apologies, Lord Li Bai. I still have some questions to ask him. He can't die now. Gu Xianyuan said apologetically. Ah, ghost. Yi Wenjun, who reacted, turned his head and saw Gu Xuanyuan's calm face. He jumped up as if he had seen a ghost and started to run away frantically. Gu Xianyuan didn't chase after him and just shot out a sword chi from the Zhu Xian sword in his hand, which cut through Yi Wenjun's legs and hit his hamstring. Therefore, Yi Wenjun fell forward and completely lost the ability to move. He could only lie on the ground and wait for Gu Xuanyuan's judgment. Why? I clearly saw that all your blood had flowed out, so why are you still alive? This is impossible. This is impossible. Yi Wenjun, who had lost the ability to move, muttered to himself as he lay on the ground. He still couldn't believe that Gu Xianyuan was unharmed. My blood has indeed flowed out, but this doesn't mean that I'm dead. A small capsule the size of a BB bullet suddenly appeared in Gu Xuanyuan's hand. Through the transparent shell of the capsule, It could be seen that this capsule contained some golden liquid. Emperor's blood. Yi Wenjun was, after all, a descendant of the Emperor's sword family, and his knowledge far surpassed other sword wielders. Therefore, he immediately recognized what was in Gu Xuanyuan's hand, and understood that he had been tricked by Gu Xianyuan. Gu Xianyuan shouted for Yi Wenjun to quickly use the medical pod to save him, but he secretly had a capsule with Emperor's blood in his mouth. Gu Xianyuan did this to test Yi Wenjun's reaction, to see if Yi Wenjun had the intention to kill her. In the end, the naive Yi Wenjun fell for it. He really thought that this was a great opportunity to kill Gu Xianyuan. So not only did he not put Gu Xianyuan in the medical pod in time, he even shook Gu Xuanyuan's body with all his might, trying to shake all the blood out of Gu Xuanyuan's body. In the end, just as Gu Xianyuan was about to completely lose consciousness, she bit open the sovereign blood capsule hidden in her mouth. Under the effect of the sovereign blood, her body, which had originally become an empty shell, began to produce new blood at a crazy rate. This was because Yi Wenjun had already believed in the illusion that Gu Xianyuan had lost all of her blood. In a panic, she did not confirm further and revealed her true appearance. With Li Bai's help, he revealed many facts that Gu Xianyuan couldn't imagine. He also revealed the identity of the mastermind behind the scenes. Now that you put it that way, didn't you use me for nothing? Hearing the conversation between Gu Xianyuan and Yi Wenjun, Li Bai said with some dissatisfaction, "Did you already know that I was hiding in the sandpit, but deliberately didn't find me so that I could help you force out the truth? That's not it. I never thought that Lord Li Bai would actually stand on the side of justice." Gu Xianyuan spread out her hands. "To be honest, I thought that Lord Li Bai was together with him, and just wanted to take a look. That's where you're wrong. How can there be a side of justice in this world? You're just thinking that you're righteous for nothing." Li Bai's face was full of sarcasm. "No." Hearing Li Bai's sarcasm, Gu Xianyuan suddenly became incomparably serious and said solemnly, "I am justice. I am the partner of justice." "Is that so?" Hearing Gu Xuanyuan's words, Li Bai looked indifferent on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. Li Bai had to admit that he was moved by these words. "Next, it's your business." After Li Bai finished speaking, Gu Xianyuan walked over to Yi Wenjun's side. Looking at Yi Wenjun, who was constantly struggling to get up from the ground, Gu Xianyuan let out a long sigh and said somewhat woodenly, "If you weren't the descendant of Zetian Jindi, if you weren't the only descendant of I Ching, I would definitely kill you and get rid of a scourge like you for humanity. But since you're the only descendant of I Ching, then I'll let you off the hook. If you tell me the whole story, I can let you live. If you promise not to tell anyone about what happened today, then I can tell you the truth." Yi Wenjun's words had not finished when the black sword suddenly jumped out of the void and said with a sharp and gloomy voice, "Yi Wenjun, don't forget your beloved woman." Noisy. No one was able to clearly see what Gu Xuanyuan's actions were, and the next second, the black sword was grabbed by Gu Xuanyuan's hand. Even the black sword itself was caught off guard and was completely unable to react, while its mouth was still threatening Yi Wenjun. "I want to see what is your true face." As Gu Xuanyuan's voice fell, a large amount of sword essence was injected into the black sword through Gu Xuanyuan's right hand. Because this black sword was not Gu Xuanyuan's sword mother, or perhaps this flying sword was not even a sword mother, when a large amount of sword essence was forcefully injected into it, the black sword faced the fate of collapse. Sure enough, after Gu Xianyuan absorbed about 10,000 quarks of sword essence, the entire black sword began to tremble violently, and the black color on the surface of the blade actually began to fall off bit by bit, revealing the color of white iron within. "Ah!" The black sword let out a scream. It seems like the person hiding behind the black sword was suffering a great deal of pain. "Gu Xianyuan, go on. You are only a part of fate. You cannot escape the end of fate." "Ah!" After leaving behind a heart-wrenching scream, the black sword no longer made any sound, and at this time, the black surface of the black sword had completely fallen off, revealing its true sword body. A man-made sword mother aqua blue sword? Looking at the true appearance of the black sword, Gu Xianyuan had an expression of, I have already guessed it. Gu Xianyuan had already guessed that the true body of this black sword was most likely a man-made sword mother. Obviously, the reason why this black sword could speak like a human and could even split the void was because the mastermind's consciousness fragment was hidden within this black sword. And it was impossible for a normal sword to store a consciousness fragment. Only a man-made sword mother could do this. Of course, a natural sword mother could also do this, but using a natural sword mother to store a consciousness fragment was a little too extravagant. Moreover, the natural sword mother itself happened to have a strong consciousness, unless the sword mother herself did not want to live, or the entire natural sword mother was destroyed. Otherwise, even if the flood-level Yuan Ko made a move, it would be impossible to directly erase the natural sword mother's consciousness, so the true body of this black sword could only be a man-made sword mother. I wonder if this man-made sword mother can still be used normally. Gu Xianyuan hesitated as he looked at the man-made sword lady that had revealed its true appearance. This man-made sword lady looked as good as new, without any abnormalities at all. It would be a pity if it was destroyed just like that. After all, every man-made sword lady required a large amount of resources to create. But this was, after all, a man-made sword mother that was once occupied by the consciousness fragment of the mastermind. If that mastermind had placed some traps inside the sword mother, when a new sword wielder synchronized with this man-made sword mother, would he be like the current Yi Wenjun, tempted by the consciousness fragment and degenerate into a traitor of humanity? Put this sword on me. Suddenly, the execution immortal sword in Gu Xuanyuan's hand spoke. Hearing this, Gu Xianyuan did as she was told without hesitation, and put the two swords together. A beam of golden light entered the man-made sword lady's aqua blue sword from the immortal vanquishing sword's body, and then exited. The immortal vanquishing sword said lightly, "There's no problem." This man-made sword lady's interior is very clean. It seems like the execution immortal sword let its consciousness walk inside this man-made sword mother. Gu Xianyuan secretly guessed. At the same time, she was even more surprised by the execution immortal sword's origin and ability. This was an ability that she had never heard of before. She had never heard of a natural-born sword mother being able to freely break through the shackles of her own body and enter another sword mother's body. Although King Yu's consciousness fragment had also done this, it was done without a sword body, and was very different from the execution immortal sword, which had not even completely synchronized with the sword mother. But since the execution immortal sword had confirmed the safety of this man-made sword mother, Gu Xianyuan believed it, and put the man-made sword mother into her dimensional pocket, preparing to find an opportunity to give it to Yuzhong City for use. After settling the matter with Black Sword, Gu Xianyuan once again directed her attention to Yi Wenjun. But at this moment, Yi Wenjun was clearly affected by Black Sword's last sentence. Her head was lowered, her body and face were tense, and she had an expression that said, "I have nothing to say." Yi Wenjun, don't forget about the woman you love. Thinking of the sentence that made Yi Wenjun shut up, Gu Xianyuan nodded thoughtfully. It was very clear that the person Yi Wenjun loved was controlled by Ming Yuan Jiendi. This was probably one of the reasons why Yi Wenjun would betray her, betray humanity, and secretly kill her. Then the crux of the problem fell on the woman Yi Wenjun loved. Who was this woman? Gu Xianyuan instinctively began to recall the time when she and Yi Wenjun had experienced together. When they went to the Changyang mountain range, she, Wenjun, Song Yifei, and Lian Yanling, the four of them fought side by side. Wait. A bolt of lightning struck Gu Xuanyuan's mind. She suddenly realized who the woman Yi Wenjun loved was. Chapter 1154. Yifei. Song Yifei. Is she in Ming Yuan Jindi's hands right now? Gu Xianyuan squatted down and grabbed Yi Wenjun's collar. She pulled him in front of her and asked loudly, How? How do you know? How do you know about Yifei? When Yi Wenjun heard Song Yifei's name, it was as if she had eaten a mouthful of oil and vinegar at the same time. Her facial expression began to change drastically, and her facial features were almost squeezed together. Such a drastic reaction proved that Gu Xinyuan's guess was right. The woman Yi Wenjun loved was undoubtedly Song Yifei, and Song Yifei was probably under the Netherira's Sword Emperor's control right now. As for why Gu Xinyuan could guess that this woman was Song Yifei, the reason was very simple. When they were adventuring together, Gu Xinyuan noticed that Yi Wenjun's eyes were always on Song Yifei, especially when Song Yifei acted very close to him. The sadness contained in Yi Wenjun's eyes could be easily noticed by anyone who was slightly observant. Moreover, Gahan knew very well that Song Yifei liked him. She had put all her love on him. At that time, he was Yi Wenjun's savior, and he had brought Yi Wenjun to find the treasure left by his ancestor. He was too ashamed to compete for Song Yifei's love. He could only hide this love deep in his heart and reveal it inadvertently. Although Gahan had noticed this a long time ago, Yi Wenjun was still a good young man at that time. Gahan believed that as time went by, Yi Wenjun would definitely let go of his fantasies about Song Yifei. Therefore, he never dealt with these things. But now it seemed that this love was not controlled. Instead, it became more and more intense. Of course, based on this guess, the evidence was still a bit thin. Gahan and Yi Wenjun did not have much contact. If Yi Wenjun liked another girl, then Gahan would not know. How could he be so sure that the woman controlled by Mingyuan Jindi was Song Yifei? Of course, there were other reasons for this. Most importantly, Song Yifei's sword lady was not any other sword lady. It was the sword lady of the demonic iris sword that belonged to the demonic iris sword emperor. Back then, after Mingyuan Jindi had betrayed the humans, she had left all of her sword ladies to the humans, except for the Emperor's sword lady. This was equivalent to her betrayal alone. Because of this, and the fact that Mingyuan Jindi rarely appeared in front of humans after becoming Yuan Ko, he rarely became enemies with humans. In fact, the dimensional rift where Mingyuan Jindi resided could even be open to humans, providing a zone where humans and Yuan Ko could coexist peacefully. Therefore, although the human government had reached the abyss of history with Mingyuan Jindi and had become the most hated traitor of the human race, Mingyuan and Jindi had become the human race's most hated traitor. However, in reality, Mingyuan Jindi's reputation was not bad. Humans did not insult Mingyuan Jindi all day long. It was also because of this that Gahan had let down his guard when he found out that Song Yifei's sword lady was the Mingyuan sword. He felt that it was not a big deal and that it was just an ordinary sword lady. He could not treat the Mingyuan sword differently just because it had once been Mingyuan Jindi's sword lady. Otherwise, he would hurt the sword lady's heart. Furthermore, the sword ladies that Mingyuan Jindi had left behind had gradually coordinated with the other sword bearers. They got along very normally and peacefully, and nothing strange had happened in their lives. Many sword bearers had died on the battlefield for humans. However, Gu Xinyuan had neglected the Mingyuan sword. Mingyuan Jindi's title came from the Mingyuan sword, so the Mingyuan sword definitely had a special meaning to Mingyuan Jindi. Furthermore, ever since the Mingyuan sword had left Mingyuan Jindi, it had never synchronized with the other sword bearers. Gahan had neglected this point at the time, but now that he thought about it, there must be a deeper meaning behind it. Perhaps Mingyuan Jindi had hidden some shocking conspiracy in the Mingyuan sword. Even after synchronizing with the Mingyuan sword, Song Yifei's behavior was very normal. There was nothing suspicious about it, so Gahan gradually stopped thinking about it. However, 3 months after Gahan entered the Shanhai Pass, Gahan noticed that Song Yifei was stammering when he tried to contact her. He felt that something was wrong. A year and a half after entering the Shanhai Pass, Gahan realized that he had completely lost contact with Song Yifei. Although he could still call Song Yifei never responded to Gahan's calls. She would only let the beeping sound on the communicator until Gahan gave up and hung up. Unfortunately, Gahan didn't think too much about it at the time. He only thought that Song Yifei might have given up on his friendship and found a new love of her own, so she didn't want to contact him anymore. However, because he was like a little girl and didn't want to hang up, Gahan almost never contacted Song Yifei again. He hoped that Song Yifei would find her own happiness. Now, it seemed that Gahan was very wrong. Song Yifei might not have fallen into a new love, but had fallen into Ming Yuan Jindi's hands. He didn't know what happened to Song Yifei to make her fall into Ming Yuan Jindi's hands, but there was one thing he didn't doubt. The Ming Yuan sword must have played an important role in this. Sigh. Gu Xinyuan sighed in her heart. I haven't rescued Lu Shihua yet. I haven't solved the problem with the immortal Slayer sword, and I haven't found Artoria yet. Now, I have to find a way to free Song Yifei from Ming Yuan Jindi's hands no matter how hard I try. Gu Xinyuan said to Yi Wenjun, Don't worry, Song Yifei is my brother's good friend. I'll do my best to save her from Ming Yuan Jindi's hands. You must tell me everything you know so that I can come up with a plan that has the highest chance of success. Unexpectedly, after hearing Gu Xuanyuan's words, Yi Wenjun let out a few dry laughs from the depths of her throat, and with a strange crying voice, she said, Yes, it's not in their hands. She's my brother's girlfriend. Oh no, your brother doesn't like Yifei at all. He likes that woman from the Liu family, right? What a joke. Yifei comes crying to me almost every night, saying that the person she loves doesn't care about her at all. But how would she know that the person I love has never cared about me? Yi Wenjun said in despair. Tears flowed out of her eyes and nostrils. It was hard to tell which were tears and which were snot. Do you know how much of a jerk your brother is? Do you know how shameless and greedy your brother is? Yi Wenjun screamed like a parrot that had been strangled. It doesn't matter if your brother loves the women of the Lunyan clan or the power of the Lunyan clan. Since he has never cared about Yifei, why didn't he just tell Yifei? Why didn't he kill Yifei's thoughts so that Yifei could be with me? He's hanging like this. It's very interesting to hang like this, isn't it? It shows how charming he is, isn't it? It shows how kind and loving he is, and how he doesn't want to be hurt, isn't it? It proves that he is the main character of the harem novel, and that I, Yi Wenjun, am just a pitiful villain, right? Yi Wenjun's series of deafening questions caused Gu Xuanyuan's hand to loosen, and Yi Wenjun lost his support and fell back onto the desert. But at this moment, Yi Wenjun's emotions had already erupted to the extreme. Both of his hands were tightly inserted into the scorching hot yellow sand. Both of his fists were grabbing out handfuls of yellow sand, crazily throwing them towards the sky, many of which hit Gu Xuanyuan's body, hitting Gu Xuanyuan's eyes. Gahan, you bastard! You bastard! Yi Wenjun screamed at the top of his lungs. Every word was filled with deep hatred for Gahan. At this moment, Gu Xinyuan suddenly understood that even if Song Yifei wasn't controlled by Ming Yuan Jindi, Yi Wenjun would still reach out to him in the end to take the cruelest and most useless revenge for his lost love. Do you know? After these negative emotions were vented out, Yi Wenjun's eyes finally recovered a bit of clarity. He raised his head and said to Gu Xinyuan in a hoarse voice, Do you know? It's not that she ended up like this because of your little brother. It's because of your little brother's ruthlessness towards her and his disdain towards her that she fell into despair. That's why she was bewitched by Ming Yuan Jindi. Both of our tragedies are because of your little brother. It's all because of your little brother. Yi Wenjun cried and successfully pushed the blame onto Gahan's head. No, my little brother never disdained Song Yifei. I know my little brother very well. His only obsession in life is to eliminate all Yuan Ko. At that time, if Song Yifei is still willing, my little brother will be with her. Gu Xinyuan said in a daze. It was unknown whether she was making a promise for her little brother or for herself. Destroy all of the Yuan bandits? That's the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life. Yi Wenjun's expression was incomparably mocking. Tell your little brother that instead of thinking about exterminating all of the Yuan bandits, it's better to think about how to resist the future disaster. Even if your little brother can ascend to the throne and become the emperor, he'll still be a laughable joke in the face of this disaster. Wait, what disaster are you talking about? Gu Xuanyuan's heart trembled. This was not the first time she had heard of such a saying. Many people had told her that mankind would face an unprecedented disaster. Among them, there were peerless existences like the Sword Ancestor, and there was also Flowing Time Maple, the leveler of a different world. How would I know? They've never been willing to tell me any real secrets. After saying this, Yi Wenjun powerlessly collapsed to the ground. She tore open her clothes and revealed her chest. She drew a circle around her heart and laughed. I won't tell you another word. You can kill me now. Chapter 1155. After hesitating for a long time, Gu Xianyuan did not kill Yi Wenjun in the end. This was because Gu Xianyuan did not want to see Zetian Jindi's only bloodline into her hands. Gu Xianyuan owed Yi Qing too much. Gu Xianyuan was not a saint. She would not let Yi Wenjun, who hated her so much and could cause her so much trouble, live freely in this world. Moreover, Yi Wenjun had betrayed humanity. According to human law, it would be reasonable for Gu Xianyuan to kill him. After much consideration, Gu Xianyuan decided to imprison Yi Wenjun for eternity. She teleported Yi Wenjun to the Great Formation of Trials on Chanyang Mountain through the jasper ring on her finger, then controlled the formation to create a hopeless situation for Yi Wenjun that no sword wielder of famed swords could ever break through. Then, she arranged for Yuanko's memory cores nearby to keep a tight watch over the hopeless situation. Of course, Gu Xianyuan also considered the possibility that the mastermind behind Yi Wenjun could use the Hand of the Void to save Yi Wenjun. Fortunately, the trial formation that Yi Qing created had a small formation that shielded the power of the Void. Even if it was an Emperor Sword level or a Primordial level Yuanko, it would not be able to save Yi Wenjun in this area. Therefore, Gu Xianyuan was sure that unless she released Yi Wenjun would not be able to escape or be saved. This can also be considered as your ancestral land. I hope that the ancestral land can awaken your conscience and let you wake up in time. Gu Xianyuan finally said these words to Yi Wenjun before imprisoning Yi Wenjun. Did you banish him into the void? Seeing Gu Xianyuan wave his hand and Yi Wenjun disappear inexplicably, Li Bai asked curiously. I guess so. Gu Xianyuan obviously could not explain to Li Bai about the trial formation. Seeing that Gu Xuanyuan's answer was very perfunctory, Li Bai laughed dryly and cupped his fists. Oh well, I have nothing to do with Bai anymore. Goodbye. Wait. Before Li Bai could leave, he was stopped by Gu Xianyuan again. Even Bai was used by you. What else do you want? Li Bai said unhappily. Lord Li Bai, please forgive me. About my two female friends, please tell me more details. What happened? Are they really dead? Although Gu Xuanyuan's expression was calm, but the trembling and grief in her voice could not be concealed no matter what. Sigh, what a sin. Probably hearing the emotions in Gu Xianyuan's words, Li Bai sighed and recounted the entire matter in detail from beginning to end. It turned out that Li Bai came to this world 5 days ago. As for how Li Bai came to this world, Li Bai deliberately avoided it. Of course, this had nothing to do with Lu Shihua, so Gu Xianyuan didn't ask this question, although Gu Xianyuan really wanted to know the story behind it. After coming to this world, Li Bai was very confused at first. At one point, he thought that he had been teleported away. He never thought that he had come to another world. It wasn't until Li Bai found the ruins of a city in the desert and found an incomplete copy of Romance of the Broken Tang Dynasty that he realized that he might have come to the future world. In the next few days, Li Bai tried to find some living people to answer the questions in his heart. However, Li Bai didn't meet a single living person. Instead, he met some strange monsters with many magical abilities. Li Bai fought with these monsters a few times and discovered that not only did these monsters have very strange abilities, they would not leave behind corpses after they died. All of them were suddenly sucked away by a whirlpool that suddenly appeared. Later, Li Bai even thought that humans might have perished because of these strange monsters. Of course, Li Bai didn't know that he was actually the same as these monsters, Yuan Ko. Yesterday afternoon, Li Bai, who was in a depressed mood, began to practice his sword art in the desert. This was also the origin of the sword mark that Gu Xianyuan saw before. As a result, Li Bai was halfway through practicing his swordsmanship when he found two women running for their lives in a frenzy. Behind the two women, there was a large group of monsters chasing after them. It wasn't easy for him to see his own kind, so Li Bai naturally chose to attack without hesitation. A few sword auras sent all the monsters back into the dimensional whirlpool. When he turned around, he saw two women, but they were covered in all kinds of wounds. Their blood was almost completely drained, just like Gu Xianyuan. Their consciousness had also become muddled due to the excessive blood loss caused by the long period of escape. Both of them were on the verge of death. Later, Li Bai took them to an oasis to treat them. When he asked them some questions, the two women were already dead. Li Bai had no choice but to put them in a coffin and bury them in an oasis with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Don't think that Bai likes to drink and write poems, but Bai is actually a very good doctor. I've already looked at the pupils of these two girls, looked at their breathing, felt their heartbeats, and even took their pulse. They're really dead, so I buried them in the coffin. Li Bai might have thought that Gu Xianyuan would blame him for randomly burying people. So Li Bai specially explained to prove that he was definitely burying dead people and not living people. Wait! Gu Xianyuan keenly sensed something unusual from Li Bai's superfluous words. Say it again. How did you bury them? Didn't I say it? Li Bai repeated helplessly. I found a place with beautiful scenery and good function, dug a big hole, and buried them. All right. I also made a tombstone with iron growing in its body to ensure that they didn't suffer any grievances after they died. That's not the point. Gu Xianyuan waved her hand. You just said that you buried them in a coffin. Yes. Li Bai nodded subconsciously. Of course the dead should be placed in a coffin. What's wrong with that? No, I'm just curious. Lord Li Bai, where did you get the coffin? Don't tell me you purposely chopped down the nearby wood to make the coffin? Or did you bring this coffin over when you transmigrated? Gu Xianyuan immediately asked. Young lady, are you joking? How could I bring a coffin over? Li Bai stared at Gu Xianyuan with dissatisfaction. Moreover, I'm not a carpenter. I can't do carpentry. Li Bai shook his head. Then where did this coffin come from? Air. Li Bai hesitated for a moment, then said hesitantly, You might not believe it, but these coffins suddenly appeared by themselves, and these two key coffins are made of transparent crystal, and the coffins can even glow. Bai has never seen such a magical coffin before. I'm afraid that even the Emperor can't afford to use a coffin like this. How is this a coffin? It's clearly a medical pod. Gu Xianyuan complained in her heart, and at the same time, a sense of hope ignited in her heart. Obviously, these coffins... No, they're medical pods. These medical pods didn't appear out of thin air. They were taken out from the dimensional pocket by Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit before they completely lost consciousness, so that Li Bai could place them into the medical pods. If Li Bai could place them into the medical pods at the first instance, then Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives could be saved. Lord Li Bai, how long did it take for the two crystal coffins to appear before you placed them in? Gu Xianyuan hurriedly asked. There was quite a bit of time, Li Bai said solemnly. After they fainted, Bai performed a lot of emergency treatment on them, but unfortunately, it was to no avail and was still unable to save their lives. After confirming that they had indeed met with misfortune, Bai then allowed them to rest in peace. Gu Xianyuan really wanted to give Li Bai a good scolding. If Li Bai hadn't done some unnecessary emergency treatment, then Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives would have been saved by now. However, Li Bai just had to make a move, which caused a lot of precious emergency treatment time to be wasted. Whether Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives would have become a huge question mark. However, Gu Xianyuan also knew in her heart that this couldn't be blamed on Li Bai. If Li Bai hadn't appeared in time to save Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives, Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives probably wouldn't have any hope at all. Forget it. I can only hope that Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives are tough. Gu Xianyuan sighed in her heart. Although there was still a theoretical 5 minutes of emergency treatment time after a person had completely lost their breath, pulse, and heartbeat, there was still a certain degree of hope that they could be revived within these 5 minutes as long as they tried their best to save them. However, this required not only the correct rescue measures, but also a lot of luck. With the medical pod, Gu Xianyuan didn't have to worry about whether the rescue measures would fail or not. She only had to worry about whether Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's luck was good enough, and how long this Lord Li Bai delayed before placing them in the medical pod after discovering that they had lost their breath and heartbeat. "Bring me there." Gu Xianyuan stood up abruptly and said to Li Bai impatiently. "Bring you where?" Li Bai was a little confused. "Of course it's to bring me to the place where you buried them. Lord Li Bai doesn't even give me the right to pay my respects to them," Gu Xianyuan said lightly. "That's true. Bai made a slip of the tongue." Li Bai smiled apologetically, then used his finger to point towards a northwest direction and said, "It's right there. We'll be there in about 2 hours. It's getting late now, so we have to hurry up. Otherwise, it'll probably be dark by the time we get there." After saying that, Li Bai prepared to take big strides. There's no need to go through so much trouble. In the blink of an eye, Li Bai was stunned to see a dark red steel monster appear in front of him. Chapter 1156. What is this thing? Li Bai looked curiously at everything inside Yan Huang 3008. Everything in the maglev flying car was extremely novel to Li Bai. For example, Li Bai toyed with the button that controlled the car window for a full 5 minutes, controlling the car window more than 30 times before he could barely satisfy his curiosity. Then there was the rear-view mirror, the chair that could move back and forth, the air conditioner that emitted cold air, the onboard computer that could be controlled with a touchscreen, the car lights that could be switched on and off, and the cigarette lighter that emitted a flame at the touch of a button. In short, everything in a maglev flying car was extremely novel to Li Bai. When a maglev flying car came to a stop, Gu Xianyuan called for Li Bai to alight. Li Bai was still a little reluctant, wishing that he could stay in the car and play with all these novelties. "Wow, it's really fast. Almost as fast as in Lushan's Fergana horse," Li Bai exclaimed in admiration after estimating the time he had spent in the car. Gu Xianyuan did not want to ridicule the fact that a Fergana horse could catch up to a maglev flying car. Even a great poet like Li Bai had world-destroying swordsmanship, so it was not strange for a Fergana horse to surpass the speed of sound. Thanks to the huge tombstone that Li Bai had created, Gu Xianyuan immediately found the grave of Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit. When Gu Xianyuan got closer, she realized that Li Bai had found a large piece of concrete prefabricated board that had been abandoned 1,000 years ago to make the tombstone. No wonder Li Bai said that it was a stone with iron growing in its body. The grave of 2 nameless madams. These were the words that Li Bai had carved on the tombstone with a sword. After those 9 large words, there were a few smaller words, left by Li Tai Bai of Jianan. These words were written with the sword freely, fast and smooth, with a sense of elegance amidst the boldness and elegance. The structure was uneven and undulating, full of emotion and interest. Gu Xianyuan was full of praise when she saw it. At the very least, Gu Xianyuan would not have been able to write such good words if she were to write them herself. What Gu Xianyuan did not know was that if this tombstone had been placed in the era before the Great Calamity 1,000 years ago, just these few words alone would have been worth at least 100 million. This was the authentic work of Li Bai. In the whole world, except for the Palace Museum, which had Li Bai's on the balcony calligraphy, no other authentic work of Li Bai could be found. This was a priceless treasure. "You're in my way." With a sweep of Gu Xuanyuan's sword qi, this priceless tombstone was uprooted by Gu Xianyuan, and he casually threw it on the ground. Looking at Li Bai, who was chasing after him, the flesh on his face could not help but tremble a few times. "Young lady, are the words of white so unattractive to you?" Li Bai probably felt that Gu Xianyuan looked down on his words, so he uprooted the tombstone. Naturally, he felt extremely ashamed. "No way. It's much better than my handwriting," Gu Xianyuan casually replied, and no longer paid attention to Li Bai. The execution immortal sword blossomed with more than 10 sword qis. And these sword qis, which were powerful enough to split gold and stone, were now reduced to pitiful excavators as they began to crazily dig at the grave mound that Li Bai had filled. "Miss, what are you doing?" When Li Bai saw Gu Xuanyuan's even more excessive actions, he could not take it anymore. He also released more than 10 sword qis to collide with Gu Xuanyuan's sword qis. causing both of them to cancel each other out. Then, Li Bai stood in front of Gu Xianyuan and asked with righteous indignation, "Miss, could it be that you have been lying to White all along? That you're not the friend of these two ladies, but their enemy? What nonsense are you talking about?" Gu Xianyuan narrowed her eyes. "How could I be their enemy? Then, miss, why did you dig up their graves? Do you want them to not be able to rest in peace, even in death?" Li Bai thought that Gu Xianyuan wanted to dig up the graves of Lu Shihua and the others. In Li Bai's era, digging up graves could be said to be the #1 evil act in the world, and it was almost on the same level as killing people. I can't explain it to you clearly right now, but please believe me, I definitely have no intention of harming my friends. To explain something like a medical cabin to someone like Li Bai, who was thousands of years behind her, it was obviously not something that could be done with just a few words. Therefore, Gu Xianyuan could only guarantee in this way. "All right, I'd like to see what you're up to." Li Bai thought for a moment, then stepped aside. This way, Gu Xianyuan could continue digging. What Gu Xianyuan wanted to complain about was that Li Bai's work attitude was a bit too serious. Gu Xianyuan dug more than 20 meters deep, but she still couldn't find the coffins of Lu Shihua and the others. In the end, it was only when she dug 25 meters deep that her sword Qi felt something hard. After laboriously digging away the surrounding soil, the two medical cabins finally revealed their true appearance. Thank the heavens! When Gu Xuanyuan's sword Qi swept the two medical cabins to the ground, when Gu Xianyuan blew away the soil covering the glass cover of the medical cabins, and when Gu Xianyuan saw the situation inside through the glass, Gu Xianyuan said from the bottom of her heart. Gu Xianyuan saw a pair of lively, rolling eyes that contained infinite fear and surprise. "Sister Xianyuan?" When the cover of the medical cabin was opened, Lu Shihua immediately threw himself into Gu Xuanyuan's arms and began to cry uncontrollably. The experience of the past 10 hours had given Lu Shihua great fear. Lu Shihua thought he was buried alive. In fact, Lu Shihua only suffered some flesh wounds, and no vital parts of his body were truly injured. He only died because he had lost all his blood. Therefore, the treatment of the medical cabin was relatively simple. She only needed to heal Lu Shihua's wounds, quickly produce the lost blood, and, at the same time, find a way to awaken Lu Shihua's consciousness. Precisely because the treatment process was simple, Lu Shihua's treatment was completed after only 7 or 8 hours. At about 6 a.m. this morning, he woke up in the medical cabin. After waking up, Lu Shihua found himself in the most terrifying moment of his life. When Lu Shihua woke up and wanted to open the cover of the medical bay to leave, he was horrified to find that the medical bay system had notified him that the cover of the medical bay could not be opened due to the immense pressure. Only then did Lu Shihua realize that the situation outside was a bit strange. At first, Lu Shihua thought it was nighttime, so it was dark outside of Liao City. But it was only then that Lu Shihua realized that there was something wrong with the night outside. Not only could he not see any stars or the moon, there wasn't even a faint light. This was extremely abnormal. No matter how deep the night was, there should be a trace of light. Thinking of this, Lu Shihua immediately took out his personal terminal and used the scanning function of the personal terminal to scan the surrounding environment. He was horrified to find that he was more than 20 meters underground. He was buried alive. If you put yourself in his shoes, you would know that there was nothing more terrifying than being buried alive, especially when you were trapped in a coffin. That feeling of not being able to do anything but silently waiting for death was a great fear. Under such fear, even the most optimistic person would fall into the predicament of a mental breakdown in a few hours. Just like Lu Shihua, who was trapped in the medical cabin. In the first hour after waking up, Lu Shihua could still maintain basic rationality and was trying hard to think of a way to escape from the medical cabin. From the first to the third hour after waking up, Lu Shihua had completely given up on the idea of escaping from the underground with her own strength. She began to recall her past life in an attempt to relieve the mental pressure. From the third to the fifth hour after waking up, Lu Shihua began to cry loudly. She was no longer willing to think about anything and could only cry to vent her emotions. From the 5th hour after waking up, Lu Shihua did not know how much time had passed. During this period of time, Lu Shihua was completely silent. She no longer wanted to cry, nor did she want to think about anything else. She lay quietly in the medical cabin like a real zombie. However, this was not a good thing. It was because of the crazy accumulation of negative emotions. If this state continued for too long, Lu Shihua would eventually have a mental breakdown due to the excessive accumulation of negative emotions. When Lu Shihua's mental state was stretched to the extreme and was about to fall into a complete breakdown, a sudden light appeared and saved her. Like an angel, Gu Xinyuan appeared in front of her. At the moment of being rescued, Lu Shihua could no longer suppress his own emotions, and his negative emotions once again exploded forth, which resulted in the scene of Lu Shihua hugging Gu Xinyuan and crying out loud. Similarly, because his emotions exploded too intensely, Lu Shihua didn't notice a fact at all. The fact that his body wasn't covered at all, and the fact that he was just lying naked in Gu Xuanyuan's embrace. On the other side, Li Bai very considerately turned around. This could fully prove that Li Bai was a good person. So when Gu Xinyuan whispered in Lu Shihua's ear, telling her that she wasn't wearing any clothes, Lu Shihua let out an earth-shattering scream, and then hurriedly took out some clothes from her dimensional pocket and quickly put them on. "Who is it? Who took off my clothes?" After putting on her clothes again, Lu Shihua began to look for the damned culprit. Unless it was some special circumstances, the medical pods treatment did not require the complete exposure of one's body. Lu Shihua also remembered that although she had experienced a cruel pursuit, her clothes were still intact. Someone must have taken off her clothes after she fainted. Therefore, Lu Shihua's gaze landed on the only remaining male on the scene, which was Li Bai. Could it be that Li Bai took off Lu Shihua's clothes? This was not an impossible thing, but an extremely possible thing. Think about it. When a passionate person like Li Bai suddenly saw the fresh body of a woman who had just died after 4 to 5 days of single life, it was very normal for him to have some lewd thoughts. Anyway, this woman was already dead and would not jump out to cause trouble for Li Bai. Li Bai could do some indescribable things with a clear conscience. Therefore, what made Lu Shihua extremely worried was whether her pure and flawless body would be ruined in the hands of this animal. Chapter 1157. Why are you looking at Bai like that? Seeing Gu Xinyuan and Hua Yi's gaze, Li Bai suddenly felt uncomfortable. He said in a righteous tone, "Looking at Bai like this is insulting my character. Bai swears to the heavens that Bai has never done such a shameless and vulgar thing." First, he denied this matter completely. Then, as if to make his words more convincing, he continued, "Back then, Bai was also the #1 romantic figure in the divine capital. Back then, the thousands of female students in the divine capital all wanted to spend a night with Bai Feng Lu and gain some of his favor. Even the #1 prostitute in the divine capital, Bright Moon, offered herself to Bai and couldn't bear to part with him for a month. Also, the #1 prostitute in the divine capital, Shang Shuang, couldn't bear to part with Bai. They even spent a night with Bai in a room. Bai even wrote a poem on the spot. The moonlight in front of the bed is like frost on the ground. Bai has played with so many beautiful girls. He definitely wouldn't have any bad intentions toward these 2 girls, Li Bai concluded. Something had to be explained here. The Tang dynasty had 2 special names, Divine Capital and Divine Capital. They referred to the capital of the Tang dynasty, Chang, and, in the eastern capital, Luoyang. As for female students, it meant brothel girls. Because Xue Tao was a talented girl in the Tang dynasty, she often sang poems with the scholars of that time. The poet, Wang Jian, wrote, "Female students by the bridge, living in seclusion under loquat flowers." How many scholars know? It's better to lead the spring breeze. Later generations called the talented and learned prostitutes female students or female students. So this is the meaning of your poem. Gu Xinyuan couldn't help but complain. He thought that Li Bai's poem meant that he missed his hometown. He didn't expect there to be such a story. Sigh, let's not talk about what happened back then. Anyway, Bai dares to swear to the heavens that when these two girls were buried, their clothes were still intact. Bai definitely didn't touch them at all. Li Bai swore to the heavens. It's not him. I remember now. I did it myself. At this time, Lu Shihua finally remembered what had happened to him. He said shyly, "At that time, I thought I would be trapped here and die. I went crazy, and I don't know what I did. Now that I think about it, maybe I tore off my clothes at that time. If you don't believe me, look, these pieces of clothes are still in the medical cabin." Gu Xianyuan looked down and found that the torn clothes had sunk to the bottom of the medical bay. Through these shredded clothes, Gu Xianyuan could imagine the terrifying pressure Lu Shihua was under in the medical bay. "You've worked hard. It's my younger brother's fault. My younger brother left you alone in Yuzhong City and ignored you for 3 years. That's why this happened. It's all that bastard's fault. I'll definitely teach him a lesson for you." Gu Xianyuan gritted her teeth and said, these words were not only said to Lu Shihua, but also to Gahan himself. "It's not Master's fault. It's not Master's fault. He handed the sword pavilion to me, but I didn't manage it well. That's why it's like this now. It's all my fault. I've let down Master's expectations." Lu Shihua said with a face full of sincerity. It was obvious that she had really placed the blame on herself. This made Lu Shihua feel even more ashamed. What a good child. Gu Xianyuan touched Lu Shihua's head and praised. "By the way, Sister Xianyuan, how is my master? When I left, I heard that Master was wanted by the Sword Committee. Is he okay now? Has he been caught by the Union of Swordsmen or the people of London? Is he safe now?" When Lu Shihua calmed down, the first thing she did was to ask about her master's current situation. It was obvious how deep the friendship was. "Don't worry, your master is fine. It's just that it's not convenient for him to show up now. He's killing Yuan Ko to kill time. When this period of time is over, I will tell your master and let your master come see you." Gu Xianyuan said in a gentle voice. "There's no need for that." Lu Shihua shook her head. "Master is in danger now. It's not convenient for him to show up. Lu Shihua can live well by himself. Master doesn't need to worry. I don't care about that. Anyway, I'll tell him about you. As for whether he comes to see you or not, that's up to him." Gu Xianyuan said with a sly tone. Lu Shihua nodded with a smile on his face. "All right, two beautiful ladies. Although I don't want to disturb your reunion, don't you think it's a bit too much to leave another lady in the coffin?" Li Bai, who was at the side, actually started to defend Sword Spirit Mu Shui. "Right? And Sword Spirit Mu Shui. She must be suffocating in the medical pod. Let's hurry up and rescue her," Lu Shihua said nervously. She jumped out of the medical pod and prepared to open the lid of the medical pod to release Sword Spirit Mu Shui. "There's no need." Thinking of this, Gu Xianyuan pressed Lu Shihua's hand and said calmly, "She's not as lucky as you. She's already dead." "What?" Lu Shihua was so shocked that his legs became weak and he fell in front of Sword Spirit Mu Shui's medical pod. At this moment, Lu Shihua saw the words written on the screen of Sword Spirit Mu Shui's medical pod. "Rescue failed. Sword wielder has died. My condolences." Actually, the moment Gu Xianyuan pulled the two medical pods out, she had already seen the words on the screen and knew that Sword Spirit Mu Shui was already dead. From the time of death displayed, Sword Spirit Mu Shui had already passed away yesterday afternoon. As mentioned before, due to Li Bai stalling for time, Mu Shui's Sword Spirit and Lu Shihua had missed the best time to be treated. Although they were still placed in the medical pods, whether they could be treated depended on their fates. Lu Shihua's fate was clearly much better than Mu Shui's. In the end, Lu Shihua survived, while Mu Shui's Sword Spirit was gone forever. Sword Spirit Mu Shui. Lu Shihua's nose turned sour and his tears uncontrollably gushed out. He directly laid on the cover of the medical pod and wailed. Compared to the incomparably sorrowful Lu Shihua, Gu Xianyuan appeared very calm. Although she was somewhat sad about the death of Mu Shui's Sword Spirit, this sadness was built on the foundation of Yuzhong City. Gu Xianyuan was only sad because Yuzhong City had lost a spirit sword level sword wielder, unlike Lu Shihua, who was sad about the death of Mu Shui's Sword Spirit. who asked sword spirit Mu Shui to be extremely unfriendly towards Gahan. In the previous trial, she even directly fought with Gahan, although in the end, it was Gahan who completely suppressed sword spirit Mu Shui with his identity as a famous sword wielder and made her embarrassed in front of all the people of Yuzhong City. And this time, sword spirit Mu Shui had become Shi Jiyuan's accomplice. If it wasn't for sword spirit Mu Shui jumping out at the end to suppress sword spirit Mu Shui and actively cooperating with Shi Jiyuan to send Lu Shihua off, sword spirit Mu Shui wouldn't have died in this yellow sand. But then again, Gu Xianyuan was very curious about what happened to Lu Shihua and the others. What happened before they met Li Bai? Why were they chased by Yi Wenjun and the others? Gu Xianyuan expressed deep curiosity about this. So when Lu Shihua's emotions calmed down a little, Gu Xianyuan directly asked about the situation at that time. Yi Wenjun. After Lu Shihua was questioned by Gu Xianyuan, he immediately jumped up and said loudly, "Miss Xianyuan, you must quickly inform Yuzhong City that Yi Wenjun is a traitor. He has already betrayed Yuzhong City and pledged his allegiance to Yuan Ko and Jiandi." Calm down. Gu Xianyuan patted Lu Shihua's shoulder. "I already know about Yi Wenjun's matter. When I came here, I already exposed his true colors. He is now locked in a desperate situation by me and can no longer come out. You don't have to worry about this." So that's how it is. Lu Shihua let out a long sigh of relief and told his story. After Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit left Yuzhong City, their journey was very normal and smooth. Although the Mu Shui sword spirit didn't have a good expression towards Lu Shihua along the way, and would occasionally ridicule Lu Shihua with disdain. But as a spirit sword level sword wielder's elder and expert, the Mu Shui sword spirit also fulfilled the responsibility of an elder. All the battles along the way were settled by the Mu Shui sword spirit, and it was the Mu Shui sword spirit that protected Lu Shihua all the way here. But unexpectedly, a huge unforeseen event happened 4 days ago. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit met a human lying in a pool of blood on the way. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit naturally did not hesitate to go and save this human. And Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit immediately recognized that this human was Yi Wenjun. Although Yi Wenjun's ability wasn't high, he was still the only successor of the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family. And the Mu Shui sword spirit, who was born in an aristocratic family, naturally wouldn't not recognize this descendant of Yuzhong City's #1 aristocratic family. As for Lu Shihua, being able to recognize Yi Wenjun was completely because of Gahan. Back then, Yi Wenjun had appeared in the courtroom and saved Gahan. So Lu Shihua had some impression of this thin and weak man. Later on, when Gahan lived in Yuzhong City for a month, Yi Wenjun would often come to Gahan's house to walk around. So Lu Shihua became even more familiar with Yi Wenjun. Since they recognized Yi Wenjun's identity, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit naturally didn't hesitate to start treating Yi Wenjun and even brought Yi Wenjun for a walk. But they didn't expect that they didn't bring a former friend, but a ruthless wild wolf. Chapter 1158. After being treated by Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit, Yi Wenjun quickly regained consciousness. He told Lu Shihua and the others that he had joined Yuzhong City's mining team. When the mining team returned, he and 3 other famed swordsmen had left the team and formed a separate team, wanting to adventure and train nearby. However, they didn't expect to encounter a powerful meteor-class Yuan Ko nearby. Yi Wenjun and the others weren't a match for the meteor-class Yuan Ko at all. The 3 famed sword-rank sword-bearers all died at the Yuan Ko's hands. Only Yi Wenjun, who had a treasure passed down from the heaven-shrouding sword emperor, barely managed to escape. However, because of his heavy injuries, he fell into a coma. If Lu Shihua and the others hadn't saved him, he probably would have died here. After learning of Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit's goal, Yi Wenjun expressed his willingness to follow them to London. This way, they could take care of each other. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit did not suspect anything and naturally agreed to let Yi Wenjun temporarily join the team. Afterward, Yi Wenjun secretly told Lu Shihua that if she needed help, Yi Wenjun was willing to help her stall Mu Shui's sword spirit and create an opportunity for Lu Shihua to escape. She didn't want Lu Shihua to go to London and be humiliated by the people of London and the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. However, Lu Shihua politely refused. Lu Shihua was not stupid. He was only an ancient sword-rank swordsman. Even if she escaped the control of the Mu Shui sword spirit, where could she run to? Moreover, about 5 out of 10 Yuan-Kos they met along the way were stronger than Lu Shihua. Compared to dying at the hands of Yuan-Ko, being humiliated in London was not a big deal. Therefore, Lu Shihua did not agree to Yi Wenjun's suggestion. However, Lu Shihua did not suspect that Yi Wenjun had bad intentions. Later that afternoon, Yi Wenjun suddenly told Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit that he had found a natural hot spring while adventuring nearby. The spring water was clear and emitted a strange fragrance. It was very good for the skin. He asked Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit if they wanted to soak in the hot spring. At that time, the sky was about to turn dark, and there was no time to continue on their journey. In addition, women were completely unable to resist the temptation of the hot spring, so the sword spirit Mu Shui agreed after a moment of hesitation. Under Yi Wenjun's guidance, Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit found a hot spring. This hot spring was just as Yi Wenjun had said, giving off a unique fragrance. However, this hot spring was not big. It was about the size of half an ordinary swimming pool. If a man and 2 women were to soak in the hot spring at the same time, it would be very inconvenient. At this moment, both Lu Shi and the Mu Shui sword spirit suddenly realized that they did not have their swimsuits with them. Thus, Yi Wenjun very tactfully indicated that he had already soaked here many times before, so there was no need for him to do it again. He could wait on the shore, and, at the same time, he could act as a lookout in case Yuan-Ko suddenly appeared. The Mu Shui sword spirit naturally had no objections. She had Yi Wenjun stand guard about 100 meters away from the hot spring, while she, her treasured sword Grade Sword Maiden, and Lu Shihua's treasured sword Grade-Winged Angel Sword took off their clothes and entered the water. The reason why the Mu Shui Sword Maiden only let her treasured sword Grade Sword Maiden soak in the hot spring, and not the higher-ranked Famed Sword Grade and Spirit Sword Grade Sword Maidens, was because these 2 Sword Maidens were artificial, and their personalities were not complete. Whether they soaked in a hot spring or not was meaningless to them. Thus, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden simply put these Sword Maidens into her dimensional pocket. This hot spring was indeed the best way to relieve fatigue in the world. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden had rushed for a long time, and after soaking in a hot spring, they felt their exhaustion disappear along with the hot spring. They would feel a little drowsy if they didn't go in, and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden directly fell asleep in the hot spring. Since Yi Wenjun was keeping watch, they were not worried that Yuan-Ko would suddenly appear. This soak lasted for 4 to 5 hours. When Mu Shui and Lu Shihua felt that their skin couldn't take it anymore, they hurriedly climbed out of the hot spring. It was only at this time that these 2 careless women were shocked to find that all the clothes they had left on the shore were gone. The worst part was that the Mu Shui Sword Maiden had taken off her dimensional pocket out of habit when she bathed, and most of her Sword Maidens were directly placed in her dimensional pocket. Apart from the treasured sword Grade Sword Maiden that had soaked in the hot spring with her, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden had instantly lost all of her belongings. Fortunately, Lu Shihua firmly remembered the important points that her Master Gahan had taught her to always remember. One of them was that the sword wielder must always carry their personal terminal and dimensional pocket with them at all times. These 2 were things that the sword wielder absolutely could not lose. Thus, Lu Shihua had always been soaking in the hot spring with her dimensional pocket. Fortunately, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden still had clothes to wear. Otherwise, the 2 of them would have to run around naked in the desert. After they had put on their clothes, they immediately began to look for Yi Wenjun, who was in charge of watching over them, to ask him where their clothes had gone. At that time, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden had never thought that Yi Wenjun might have betrayed humanity. In the end, they searched around the hot spring for an entire day, but they still could not find any trace of Yi Wenjun. Even then, aside from a little suspicion, they still did not consider that Yi Wenjun had purposely disappeared. They suspected that Yi Wenjun had encountered some powerful Yuan Ko and was taken away by Yuan Ko before he could warn them. Of course, the reason was very hard to explain. If this Yuan Ko was so powerful that he could take away Yi Wenjun, who was a famed level sword wielder, without anyone noticing, then why didn't he take Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden as well? Moreover, this Yuan Ko wouldn't sneakily take away Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden's clothes. Did Yuan Ko have any perverted fetishes? The Mu Shui Sword Maiden was about to go crazy. It didn't matter if the other things were lost. The Mu Shui Sword Maiden didn't feel the pinch. Only his famed Sword Great Sword Lady and Spirit Sword Great Sword Lady were left. These were the lifeblood of a sword wielder. Losing these two sword ladies, the Mu Shui Sword Spirit would once again become a treasure sword Great Sword wielder. This was something that the Mu Shui Sword Spirit absolutely could not accept. After discussing for a while, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden decided to directly head to the nearest Lan City ruins. That was the only gathering point nearby where human sword wielder would gather on a large scale. Perhaps they could find other human sword wielder and obtain their help. There was another huge reason for heading to the Lan City ruins. After Lu Shihua opened his dimensional pocket, he helplessly told the Mu Shui Sword Maiden that there was less than a liter of pure water left in her dimensional pocket. The Mu Shui Sword Maiden naturally grumbled about this at first, blaming Lu Shihua for not bringing enough water with him. In the end, Lu Shihua could only helplessly say that she, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden, was worried that Lu Shihua would escape halfway and forcibly took away all the pure water in Lu Shihua's dimensional pocket. The Mu Shui Sword Maiden felt that as long as there was no water in Lu Shihua's dimensional pocket, even if Lu Shihua escaped, he would die of thirst in the desert. It was for this reason that Lu Shihua's maglev flying car was also taken away by the Mu Shui Sword Maiden. At this time, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden thoroughly understood the meaning of the words reap what you sow. This was also the reason why they had to head to the Lan City ruins to seek help from other sword wielder. After a long day of walking, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui Sword Maiden finally arrived at the Lan City ruins. However, after walking around the ruins for a few hours, they could only come to an incomparably sad conclusion. There was currently no second batch of human sword wielder in the Lan City ruins. At that time, the sky had already darkened, so they could only temporarily hide in the ruins that Gahan had found. They barely managed to survive the night by relying on some cooked food, instant noodles, dry bread, and fruits. At this time, another advantage of Lu Shihua's personality showed itself. Lu Shihua liked to carry 2 items, or in other words, spare tires. This way, if something was damaged, Lu Shihua wouldn't be helpless. This was the reason why Gu Xianyuan found traces of 2 tents in the ruins. Actually, these 2 tents belonged to Lu Shihua, and he had lent one to the Mu Shui Sword Maiden at the last moment. In the end, after that night, Lu Shihua's remaining liter of water was almost used up. Helpless, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden could only temporarily give up on the idea of looking for Yi Wenjun, and instead followed Lu Shihua to the water source near Lan City. They had to first find enough water to sustain their lives. Lu Shihua was indeed worthy of being Guhan's disciple. Even the path of finding the oasis was the same as Gahan's plan. After experiencing more than 10 failures and spending a night in the desert, Lu Shihua and the others finally found the oasis in the desert. The moment they saw the oasis, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden impatiently ran over and fiercely drank a large mouthful of water to quench her incomparably parched lips. Lu Shihua first drank the last bit of purified water in the sword bottle, then found a container and filled it with enough water for them to drink. However, just as Lu Shihua put the water into his dimensional pocket, the Mu Shui Sword Maiden who had rushed to drink the water from the oasis, suddenly fainted in front of Lu Shihua. At this time, Lu Shihua realized that there might be a big problem with the water. However, it was already too late. The Mu Shui sword maiden had already fainted. It was also at this time that the mastermind, Yi Wenjun, finally jumped out. The first thing he said was to tell Lu Shihua, "If you don't want the two of you to die here, then pass the position of Yuzhong City's sword pavilion master to him." It turned out that Yi Wenjun's ultimate goal was to become Yuzhong City's sword pavilion master. Chapter 1159. This guy is delusional. Does he think that you can pass the position of sword pavilion master to him with just a few words? Doesn't this require the people of Yuzhong City to accept? He's taking it for granted. Hearing Lu Shihua's words, Gu Xianyuan said angrily. However, Lu Shihua's expression turned extremely ugly after hearing that. He lowered his head and said in self-blame, "Actually, it's all my fault. If Master hadn't gone against the majority's opinion and passed the position of sword pavilion master to me, he wouldn't have had such an illusion." Lu Shihua's words sounded like he was blaming himself, but in reality, it was a slap to Gu Xuanyuan's face. Or rather, it was a slap to Gohan's face. This was because Gohan had ignored everyone's opposition and passed the position to Lu Shihua, who was still a commoner at that time. This was also the source of Yi Wenjun's delusion. Since Gohan could go against the majority's opinion and pass the position to Lu Shihua, then could he, Yi Wenjun, be like Lu Shihua? This was the harm of not abiding by the unspoken rules. P.S. The author would like to say that it is not a good thing for the main character in every book to ignore the rules of society and do something. However, at the same time, it will also destroy the stability of society. Just like the situation that Lu Shihua is facing now. This is the real feeling of society. I hope that readers who have not stepped into society can understand this point in advance, so that they don't meet with any unnecessary trouble after entering society. Anything else? Yi Wenjun's motive shouldn't be so simple, right? Gu Xianyuan sighed and said with certainty, "This Yi Wenjun should have other motives." Lu Shihua nodded his head and said with a serious expression, "He also wants the double-winged angel sword in my hands." Double-winged angel sword? What does he want your ancient sword grade sword maiden for? This is already your sword lady. He wants your sword lady. Halfway through her words, Gu Xianyuan sucked in a breath of cold air. She had already guessed Yi Wenjun's intentions and slowly spoke. He wants to ascend to the throne through the angel series of sword ladies? Yi Wenjun's talent was limited. Becoming a famed sword wielder was the limit of his talent. If Yi Wenjun's goal was to revive his heaven-shrouding family, then there was only one way for Yi Wenjun to succeed. That was to become an emperor and become an emperor sword wielder. That way, Yi Wenjun could easily revive the heaven-shrouding family. However, there were many problems. Firstly, the double-winged angel sword was already Lu Shihua's sword maiden. Even if Yi Wenjun killed Lu Shihua and made the double-winged sword maiden, he, become a famed sword wielder, would not be able to synchronize with the winged angel sword maiden. As if he saw the doubt on Gu Xuanyuan's face, Lu Shihua continued, "At that time, I had also guessed Yi Wenjun's intentions. I also told him that he was already a famed sword-rank swordsman, and that he would not be able to follow my path. Moreover, only people with the angel bloodline could synchronize with the angel sword, so he would not be able to succeed. But Yi Wenjun didn't listen to me at all. Instead, his face was full of confidence. I don't understand where he got the confidence to do this." Lu Shihua said in confusion, "It's not that he has a way, but Ming Yuan Jiandi has a way." Gu Xianyuan let out a long sigh. Ming Yuan Jiandi can be said to be the longest living Jiandi in this world. She's also the Jiandi who understands sword wielder the best. Perhaps she can find a way to forcefully synchronize with them. Lu Shihua nodded thoughtfully, evidently agreeing with Gu Xuanyuan's guess. However, Lu Shihua did not know that there was another guess in Gu Xuanyuan's heart. I'm afraid that Ing Zheng has something to do with it. After all, He knows about the sword maiden grafting technique. Moreover, he has also improved the sword maiden grafting technique. He has already improved the method to forcefully seize the sword maiden of the sword wielder when the sword wielder and the sword maiden have already synchronized successfully. If that's the case, then wouldn't that mean? Thinking of this, Gu Xuanyuan's body suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. If Ying Zheng really succeeded in researching this sword maiden grafting technique, then wouldn't it mean that Ying Zheng could seize the sword maiden of any sword wielder at will, and then transfer the sword maiden to his loyal subordinates? If that was the case, then the greatest catastrophe of mankind was about to arrive. Understanding this point, Gu Xianyuan could not wait to rush to Yanjing City and have a big fight with Ying Zheng. She wanted to thoroughly find out what this person was hiding in the dark. But Gu Xianyuan quickly gave up this idea. Not to mention whether he was currently a match for Ying Zheng and the underground forces that Ying Zheng had hidden for more than 1,000 years. Even if he could win, it would inevitably be a long and drawn-out war. Moreover, Gu Xianyuan still had the hidden danger of the execution immortal sword. Before solving the problem of the execution immortal sword, Gu Xianyuan could not go find trouble with Ying Zheng. If Ying Zheng really has such an intention, then it must be a conspiracy that cannot tolerate even the slightest carelessness. Ying Zheng will need a lot of time to prepare. I hope that the next few months can pass peacefully. Gu Xianyuan could only make such a helpless decision. Then what happened? Gu Xianyuan then asked Lu Shihua. What happened after that? Later, Yi Wenjun wanted to forcibly take me away. Naturally, I was no match for Yi Wenjun. I was about to be controlled by Yi Wenjun. At that time, I'd already made up my mind that if I fell into Yi Wenjun's hands, then I must commit suicide on the spot. This way, I might be able to disrupt Yi Wenjun's plan. Lu Shihua said in a tragic tone. Clearly, this was Lu Shihua's true thoughts. Lu Shihua had already decided to commit suicide. However, Yi Wenjun had forgotten that the sword spirit Mu Shui's treasure sword maiden was the 5-poison sword lady. And the 5-poison sword lady's sword scar contract had the effect of alleviating the poison in her sword wielder. Lu Shihua continued. In Yi Wenjun's original plan, the poison he used should have been enough to kill the sword spirit Mu Shui. However, the sword spirit Mu Shui managed to pull through. Just as I was about to be captured by Yi Wenjun, the sword spirit Mu Shui saved me. Although the sword spirit Mu Shui was a spirit sword tier sword wielder, she was only left with the treasure sword maiden. Furthermore, her body was also affected by the poison, so the circulation of her sword essence was not very smooth. Therefore, even if I joined forces with the sword spirit Mu Shui, we were still no match for Yi Wenjun. We could only reluctantly not fight or retreat. Later on, Yi Wenjun found a black sword. That black sword could actually fight with us in the air without anyone using it. Later on, Yi Wenjun even summoned a large group of Yuan Ko. The sword spirit Mu Shui and I were completely no match for him. We could only run for our lives. Because we discovered a sandstorm in the distance, we planned to sneak into the sandstorm and borrow the power of the sandstorm to escape. Lu Shihua's words were said very calmly, but the tragedy in them was incomparable. Lu Shihua had taken the initiative to enter the sandstorm. Admittedly, she could have let the powerful sandstorm sweep her up and borrow the power of the sandstorm to escape. But how many people in history could survive a sandstorm? Later on, I discovered that it wasn't a sandstorm, but a white-clothed man practicing his sword. The sandstorm we saw was all the sword chi of the white-clothed man. Later on, we were saved by the white-clothed man. But at that time, I was about to faint and didn't have the strength to talk to the white-clothed man. I could only use the last bit of my will to throw out the 2 medical pods in my dimensional pocket. I didn't expect that when I opened my eyes again, I would already be buried underground. At this point, Lu Shihua finally finished narrating her experience. At the same time, she realized that the white-clothed man in front of her and Gu Xianyuan should be the white-clothed man who had saved her. Big Sister Xianyuan, is this your boyfriend? Lu Shihua's head twitched, and she suddenly asked this question. Cough, cough. What nonsense are you talking about? Why, he is innocent. Li Bai's face turned red, and without waiting for Gu Xianyuan to explain, he took the initiative to say this. But Li Bai's rebuttal sounded more like a kind of acknowledgement. What nonsense are you talking about? He is Li Bai, a Yuan Ko. Gu Xianyuan fiercely glared at Lu Shihua. Yuan Ko. Hearing this, Lu Shihua panicked and was about to grab her two-winged angel sword, but she was stopped by Gu Xianyuan. This Lord Li Bai is a little strange. He seems to be a free agent. Don't use force for now. Oh. Lu Shihua obediently responded and no longer made threatening gestures. But after explaining to Lu Shihua, Gu Xuanyuan's heart surged with a trace of doubt. In fact, this doubt had long been on Gu Xuanyuan's whereabouts. Lu Shihua didn't know the specific situation of Li Bai, but Gu Xianyuan knew that Li Bai had actually just transmigrated to this world. According to the common knowledge that Gu Xianyuan knew, any Yuan Ko who had just arrived in this world would be polluted by filth and would instinctively be the enemy of humans. This Yuan Ko, why did this Li Bai not seem to be affected at all, and instead seemed like a normal human? Why are you looking at me? Is there anything strange about me? Li Bai noticed that Gu Xuanyuan's gaze suddenly fell on him, and immediately felt goosebumps all over his body. Even his voice became a little bashful. Lord Li Bai, can I trouble you to take off your clothes? Gu Xianyuan suddenly popped out such a sentence, causing Li Bai to turn pale with fright. What are you trying to do? Li Bai tightly hugged his upper body. I'm a poet with principles. I will not be tempted by your beauty, although you are indeed very beautiful. Noisy. Gu Xuanyuan's violent sword chi directly struck Li Bai's body, and Li Bai's clothes were instantly torn to pieces. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.